YouTube, so make, best face on.
Okay.
And I have officially clicked the big blue button, so I believe we are live. All right.
All right.
Welcome everyone to another QuaranCon continuing content with me, and also, oh God, sorry, I had double sound for a second. With me, as usual, and way more excitingly, Justin Lee Anderson, who is the winner of SPFBO 6, and also just an all-around decent human being and person that we like to talk to. So, and he's
Thanks.
also written a bunch of other books that we're going to talk about, but a few. Yeah, so we'll get into that. We'll get into a lot of things. We'll also get into like the weird twinning thing that we have happening.
Yeah, I need to hear about that because I don't know what it is. I don't know
what
twinning things are. So
really random. And I actually I had a list of them in my head, but then that disappeared. So like the only ones I remember now are our middle name and acting and living in a bunch of different countries.
Okay.
And there were some other things. There are also like the way we write and Dungeons and Dragons. And anyway, there's just like we have a stupid amount of things in common.
We should definitely hang out once British people are actually allowed to come over to North America at some point. Then we should do it.
Yeah, and we're barely allowed to go anywhere right now either. Canada, although Canada's doing all right, we've got a decent percentage of vaccines distributed, so that's nice.
Oh no, it's us. It's Plague Island. We're not allowed to go anywhere. That's everybody with any sense has banned us because we can't control COVID at all. It's ridiculous.
I feel for you. I've been watching it play out everywhere, and we've had our ups and downs. Manitoba was like the worst place in North America a few weeks ago even, but now we've vaccinated our way out of it almost, so we've got very high vaccination rates and very low case numbers at the moment, which is really nice.
Cool. Nice.
But it's been very touch and go, and I don't feel confident that we're like necessarily in the clear or anything yet. So anyway, that's Hi everyone, welcome to us talking about COVID.
We decided to do a COVID briefing instead of an interview. Hope that's okay.
Hope everyone enjoys that. Okay, so we've got a few people here already, which is lovely. Hey Anita, hey Crystal, hey Rowena. Great to see y'all.
Hello people, I can't see the list, but hi.
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye on the chat for us. If anyone has questions at any point in the interview, please put them in the chat and I will check periodically for them. I'm mostly going to try to pay attention to Justin and what we're actually saying instead of being completely distracted by the chat. So
chat will probably be more interesting, to be honest.
No, come on. And then don't forget to like and subscribe while you're here. I don't usually say that, but I need to start. If you
can I press the subscribe button? I've always wanted to do this. Press the subscribe button. It's down there.
Do it right now. He's pointing in the correct direction. So join us because we do stuff like this all the time and we interview fun people and we're silly, but also sometimes very serious fantasy talks, but mostly just silliness. If you've ever seen me interview RJ Barker, I think it's pretty evident that silly is really far more where we lean.
I don't think anybody can interview RJ and not have it be silly. I don't see how that works.
It's pretty much impossible.
No.
He wouldn't let it happen. I don't think.
No.
And if you tried too hard, he'd probably just walk out.
I can't see him doing a straightforward interview. It just wouldn't happen.
Yeah. It's super, super fun to interview him. I'm assuming this is going to be, equally ridiculous in different ways because I don't see nearly as much taxidermy behind you. But
yeah, less antlers. I was going to say the big difference between us is less, and his hair's longer than mine. Although I'm trying to catch up with him.
You're working on it, yeah.
I've been working on it. Lockdown has been a time of hair growth, but I haven't caught up with RJ yet. It's going to be a few years before I manage that.
Yeah. And only if he, cuts it a few times, probably.
Yeah, I need him to come back towards me as well. Otherwise,
right? Yeah, let's try to balance it out.
Yeah.
Do you ever see each other? Do you run into him at fantasy conventions and stuff in the UK, or is that?
Yeah. I met him at FantasyCon in what year is it? Time is fluid these days. I met at FantasyCon and I think either 2007, 2018, and then kind of every FantasyCon since we have had a blather. I think we were both at Chimera the same year as well, the first year of Chimera. So I've bumped into him at a few cons and he's just lovely. I mean, the first year we met, I was just kind of like, I just republished Carpet Diem myself, and I was going. It was essentially my first con, and I was kind of I was nobody, and he had at least the first, if not several, of his Assassins trilogy. What is it? The Wounded Kingdom. And so he was one of the sort of main attractions, as it were, at the but he was just lovely. He was really happy to chat, and he's just a really down-to-earth guy. He doesn't really care who you are. He'll just chat to you because he wants to, because you're a decent human being, and I love people like that.
Yeah, absolutely. He's so sweet. And he was one of the first big names that we sort of inadvertently wrapped into QuaranCon, and he's just been so great about doing everything. Like, he just volunteers. He's like, oh, you need me? Yeah, I'll do that. And it's just, and it's so sweet because it's like QuaranCon, we're this tiny nothing, and he's there, and we've got like Anna Smith Spark and Adrian Tchaikovsky, and and this year even more people, and I have Stephen Arion. Anyway, I can't even list all the people that I was like really shocked were down to earth enough to just like.
They're all really cool people who I meet at like FantasyCon, BristolCon, Chimera, these kind of events over here in the UK, and they're all just really lovely human beings in real life.
Yeah, it's super sweet. I am desperate to come to one of the UK conventions sometime because I want to just meet everybody.
They are really good fun. They're really good fun. I recommend it if you can make it.
Yeah, I'd love to. I just COVID, etc.
and it's slightly further for you to come, obviously.
It is, but you know what? I have a lot of friends in the UK. It's always worth my time to go and crash on couches and stuff. And so I'd love.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah. No, I can't afford to like stay in hotels anyway.
Sleep on couches. Good plan.
Yeah, exactly. Couch crashing and hitchhiking is how I go anywhere, basically. But yes, I would love that. Cool. Okay, random question. Because it's come up a bunch recently. Like, one of the things about Zoom interviews and stuff is that you never get an idea of, like, you're sort of meeting people, but you never get an idea for how tall anyone is. And so I discovered as I was interviewing Stephen Arion that he's apparently super tall. He's like 6'5".
Yeah, and I didn't know that either.
Yeah, I was like, holy crap! I did not realize you were that tall. So I'm just curious, how tall are you, Justin?
I'm 6'3". I'm not quite as tall as Stephen.
So you're not quite as tall, but you're also really tall. But that was the thing. What made me want to ask is I was just like, I wonder, because I think Stephen said something about who else was tall. I can't even remember. Anyway, I was just like.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny. I used to work in a company. This is a height story, but I used to work in a company where the joke was that 50% of the people that work in there had to be over 6 foot, because there was a bunch. Like, I was 6'3", and there was probably like 3 or 4 people there taller than me. And this is a company with only like 20 employees.
Oh wow!
So there was like a couple of guys who were 6'4", and then the tallest guy there was 6'7".
Wow, nice.
So it was ridiculous that we had this, like, for some reason, with this cluster of guys over 6'2" in the company.
Were there a bunch of really high shelves that had important documents on them or something?
Really not. No, I don't know. I really don't know what it was. It was just the weirdest thing. But yeah, I mean, it's like the average height in the company only came down because we also had quite a few small people, shorter people working for us as well. So the average height
giving you like an actual population average.
Yeah, I don't know why we had so many tall people. And the funny thing was, it used to be a bit of a fight for the raised desks, because we all needed slightly higher desks. And it used to be a bit, like, when we reorganized the office, people were like, who stole my desk? Where's my desk? It's funny.
That's really kind of hilarious. So anyway, and also a complete non sequitur. That wasn't even on the list of ridiculous questions.
Well, who loves a random ridiculous question? Sure, why not?
Pam tells me she's preparing her couch now. Thanks, Pam. I definitely will be sleeping on your couch, although I'll have to take a bunch of cat meds. But she's in Glasgow. You're in Edinburgh, right?
I am, just outside.
Yeah. Pam made me promise to heckle you about being from Edinburgh and how you Edinburghians. What do you call yourselves?
Technically, I think we're Edinburghers.
Edinburghers. Oh, great.
Which does make us sound like fast food, but there you go.
Edinburghers are she wanted to imply that they were lesser than Glaswegians, and I don't know.
Yeah.
To feel like
we got a whole thing going with Glasgow. It's a friendly rivalry. My usual response to that is that the best thing that come out of Glasgow is the M8, which is the road to Edinburgh.
Okay. Great. I honestly, I was like, wait, what's that? Yeah.
I suddenly realized that joke makes no sense if you don't know UK road networks. So it's slightly niche.
It is a little niche. And I like have hitchhiked around Scotland and yet didn't really internalize the names of the roads and stuff. So but all right, so let's get on to the actual questions, lest we spend the entire time doing non sequiturs, which is fine. But like, and you know, it's okay. So the very first, like, really important question that I just want to get out of the way is: do you find that people named Lee are inherently better than other people?
So, I like this question. So your middle name is also Lee, I take it.
Yeah. Spelled the same way.
So is my sister's, but spelled Leigh, and her oldest son, my nephew, also has Lee. So there is that, but then we've also got to look at the other side. There's Pamela Anderson Lee, which and who's the other one? Oh yeah, the one who I always worried when I debated about whether to use my middle name professionally for writing. I don't know if you'll have heard of him. It's a British comedian called Justin Lee Collins, who used to be quite well known over here. Anyway. His career went like that when it came out that apparently he'd been a really abusive partner to his girlfriend, and it was a real black mark. And I was like, ooh, okay. So the name Justin Lee might have some negative associations in the UK. I need to think about that. But I think he's been gone long enough that I don't need to worry too much about it.
You've replaced him in the Google search.
I don't think we can claim a universal quality there, because there's a couple of people there that are like,
fair enough. I mean, there's also Robert E. Lee, but of course Lee was his last name. But we don't want to be associated with him either. No, that's not good. Yeah. No. Lee Harvey Oswald. Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. Right. See, if you dig hard enough, there's some bad ones in there.
It's true. So maybe just fantasy authors named Lee that are cool. No,
let's go with that. Yeah, let's go with that. I like it. Yep. Yeah. Definitely.
And hopefully, I mean, I'm sure someone could come up with a counter example to that. but for now, no, we're gonna rock that. Okay. Second, really important question. What's your favorite Dungeons and Dragons setting?
That's a good question. I do like a good dungeon crawl. They are the sort of underground maze where you have some MacGuffin reason to be down there, and there's something you need to go and find and collect and bring back, and every room is a different jazz. Like, they're good fun. They're just good fun.
Keep running into giant oozes.
I mean, you've got the standard sort of pseudo medieval town where you wander into the tavern and somebody says, "Ooh, hey, have you heard about those people that have been going missing down the other side of town?" Ooh. They're good fun as well. So I mean, really, the classic stuff. I have to say, it's the stuff that's familiar, but it's fun, and it's it's always I like it when stuff is familiar, but then different as well. So it's not predictable, but you kind of what the ground rules are, I suppose.
True. Do you have a favorite system as well? Like if you're going to go like Forgotten Realms or Shadowrunner, I don't know, like Shadowrun.
So the one I've played the most. So there's a group of friends that I've played with for years, and I've really missed playing with during lockdown. And we just had the couple round the other night, just for drinks because it was his birthday. And so the system we've played the most is called Fantasy Hero. Which is I don't know what it is, and it's basically a pretty straightforward system. It's you pretty much just play with 3d6 for most stuff, and then you also need a d3 for some stuff. But predominantly it's just 3d6, and you're basically just you roll attack rolls, hit rolls. You roll for every now and again you maybe need to roll like 15 dice if a particular spell requires a ridiculous amount of dice. But it's mostly just based on d6, and it's a pretty straightforward system.
Nice. Do you have a decent dice collection?
Not really, because I usually play Fantasy Hero, funnily enough.
Oh, right. So you've just got a bunch of D6.
So I only need D6. Yeah, and our GM just has a big old bag of dice.
Right.
But we did start playing for a while with we did play AD&D for a while.
Nice.
And in that we then needed the D20s and stuff like that. So, and I do have somewhere on this desk, possibly even. If I could see them. I did actually buy a set because I needed a set for one of the games I played online during lockdown. I can't remember which one it was, but one of them I actually did need a set here in my hands.
Right.
So I bought a set. So I do own one little set of D&D dice that the first time I ever actually needed them. So it's cool.
Well, that's fun. I
Yeah,
think dice collection is one of my favorite aspects of D&D. Like
right.
I do love playing, but I also really like shiny dice.
Oh yeah, when I had to buy, when
Like,
I was like, oh no, I'll have to buy some dice. It's like, look at all the pretty options.
yeah. Very nice. I mean, I think it's an important question about whether or not you have dice and all that, just because, we're all nerds here. So I like waving about all the various ways in which we're nerds.
Absolutely.
And so let's see. Oh, Pam has a question, and it is D&D related. She says, as someone who's never played D&D, where would you start?
Find somebody who's a really good GM and ask them to let you play.
Yeah.
That's the simple answer. Somebody, preferably somebody you know well, who will walk you through it. I mean, our GM Sean is he's one of these. He's a very generous GM. So like, if there's a really, if you're kind of stuck not really knowing what to do, he will subtly nudge you in the right direction.
Like,
So he's
there's
very
the
generous
door
about
is
it.
flickering. It's
Yeah,
flickering. There's
yeah. Do you maybe want to?
that.
Do you maybe want to see what that is? Maybe have a look. So so yeah. Find somebody who is an experienced GM who and either wants to start up a new game or maybe has an existing game they can roll you up a character to get you into. Um, but yeah, I just an experienced GM will just talk you through it and take you through by hand and make it easy for you. And you're not you don't necessarily have to understand everything yourself in terms of the rules and everything you can and can't do. Because a good GM, you just go, listen, can I do this? And they'll say yes or no, and it's easy.
Yeah. And I think I don't know. I mean, it depends on your preferences, but for the games, like, I love rolling. I don't care, like, and I don't mind doing the small amount of math for adding modifiers and stuff, but I am very happy to have I still call them, I'm so old school, I still call them dungeon masters instead of game masters, but like, to have a DM who just like says, just roll this and add this modifier, so I don't have to actually be paying attention to which rules I
that's
need
exactly
to
what you
follow.
want. Exactly what you want.
And I like to get into the role playing part. And then meanwhile, like, I have run games also, and I'm like, oh God, it's a lot of work to be to be in charge of the rule set.
I've never run one because I don't think I've got the patience or the concentration to build it all and put it all together. It's hard enough writing books. I don't know if I could put together a game where the characters can do things entirely independently of me. That'd be far too difficult.
I mean, in that sense, it's almost easier. I don't know. I feel like the games that I've run have been very open-ended, and I don't plan too much in advance, really just like one session at a time. And that way, if we go way off the rails, I'm not like frustrated, like, oh gosh, I have to redo this whole plot I had planned because you guys decided to start a bar fight last night. And so that helps, I find, but it's a lot of work. And my brother is a great dungeon master or game master. And so I totally just like let him do it most of the time.
One of the games I've done online during lockdown was GM'd by Gareth Hanrahan, who writes for D&D books. I don't know if it's D&D, but he does write for like RPG books in his full-time job. Nice. And he's fantastic. I mean, it's like he lives and breathes this stuff. And one of the things he was saying is that the best way to do it is often just to have a vague notion of the kind of things you're going to use, and then just be flexible, because you got to be prepared to slightly roll with what happens, what the players do, and that sounds like very good advice to me.
Yeah, I think he's got a solid point there, and
and
it's nice to hear that come from someone who's like more officially involved in Dungeons and Dragons. But Pam, I would say the bottom line is friends. Like, it's always more fun to play with people, I think.
That's the point. Like, if you're not having fun just hanging out with the friends that you're playing with, then you're doing it wrong. Pizza is also really an important component of any game is large amounts of pizza being delivered, maybe an hour or two into the game.
And beverages, alcoholic or non, depending on preference, but some good drinks and some good food, I think, are always a good call. I don't know, I feel like it's a social event as much as anything else. So
it is.
So you had asked, because I in a couple of tweets and stuff, I was like, I'm going to talk to Justin about how he's my twin, and then briefly at the beginning, I've listed some of the things we have in common. One of the things we have in common is that we've lived in a number of different countries, and so my next question for you is about that. How many different places have you lived? What are your favorite and least favorite places, and why?
So most of the places I lived when I was a kid. So my dad played football, and he played here in Scotland for a few years when I was very young. In fact, obviously he started before I was born. But then when I was about 3, we moved over to the US, and he played in the old NASL over there.
Okay.
So we bounced around a lot. So we were in, I always struggle to remember. Okay, so we were in Tampa, Florida, Houston, Texas, Cleveland, Ohio. We were in New Jersey. We were in a place called Woodcliff Lake, New Jersey for about 6 months.
Oh, wow.
We were in St. Louis, Missouri, and then we finished up in Wichita, Kansas when I was sort of 10 till about 14. That's the place I remember the best because I was obviously the oldest while we were there. So we bounced around there a lot. And then when his career finished, we moved back to Edinburgh. So I was back to Edinburgh. So I should be keeping count, shouldn't I? What about, I don't know.
Oh, that's all right. Don't worry. Count.
I've lost count.
Yeah.
We moved back to Edinburgh. And then I moved up to Dundee I was up in Dundee for about 6 years, which was mostly for my university degree. And then I hung around there for a while afterwards.
Okay.
Then moved back to Edinburgh. And then I ended up by a confluence of events, ending up living in the south of France for 3 years, which was lovely. And then came back to Edinburgh as is my pattern. So that's my globe trotting. It's mostly state trotting rather than globe trotting, but yeah, it was that's my peripatetic childhood.
Nice. Well, this is one of the things that we twinned about, because I've lived in 7 different states and like 5 countries, I think, total. So
cool.
And also a lot of it moving around when I was a kid. But also and in my, actually I've also moved around a ton in my adult life.
Why did you move around a lot as a kid?
My parents were in the airline industry. And and it wasn't, it was weirdly like my parents were airline executives, so they weren't moving. They were moving because they were changing jobs, like working with different airlines, et cetera. They actually started their own airline for a little while, and we were in Arizona for about 6 or 7 years when I was tiny. And from like 9 months to 7 years of age. And then that went under because the stock market crashed. And then we moved, that early 80s stock market crash totally ruined everything. And then we moved to Germany so that my dad could work for Pan Am.
Okay.
And then we flew everywhere from there, which was super fun, because the greatest thing about having parents in the airline industry is all the free tickets.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can basically go anywhere, can't you?
Yeah.
Totally
yeah. Anyway, so like super. I mean, my childhood was insanely lucky. Like I can't even fathom it now. And so we moved around a bunch there, and then we moved back to the States, to Virginia, and then Colorado, and then my parents divorced, moved 2 different places, and then I started university. And so then it was like I went to 2/3 different universities. I was only enrolled in 2 different universities, but I spent a year in Spain also. So, and then I was technically enrolled in the University of Valencia while I was there. So essentially 3, but that was an intentional year abroad, not like so it counted towards my US schooling as well. And then, and then graduated and then moved anyway. So like this wasn't, I was just trying to explain. And then there's like Spain. So I lived in Spain, and then Japan and Canada.
I really want to go to Japan. Japan looks so really interesting.
It's so cool. We spent 2 years there, and it was just some of the best years. Like just so many amazing adventures. The people there are awesome. I mean, the people, they're people, right? There's everybody. there's awesome people and not awesome people, just like anywhere else.
Of course.
But it's but overwhelmingly welcoming and kind. And we lived in a tiny by Japanese standards, but like a city of like 400,000 people, which is they call it like the middle of nowhere. But also in a town that was like surrounded by a bunch of like truly small towns with like populations of a couple hundred, which yeah, so as far as Japan's concerned, that's like the absolute boonies. And it was gorgeous and it was lovely. Anyway, but I highly recommend Japan to everyone. But I also really recommend like see a couple of the really big famous things, but also go north or south of Tokyo into the like farming areas and go like experience some of that. Like every single town has a thing it's famous for.
Okay.
And there's like Japanese people visit a bunch of Japan themselves. Like there's a lot of Japanese tourism that is Japanese people doing it. Right. And that's part of why. So like every single town, no matter how small, has its own little tourism bureau where you show up in the town near the train station, and they've got brochures of what the thing that they're famous for. And then there's usually like one food item and one like visiting thing that you can see. And they're always really cool because Japan is so old, right? Like this is a thing that doesn't happen in North America unless you're lucky enough to go to places where you can see the First Nations people's stuff. There's not a ton of it preserved, right? But Japan has, you know, got a lot of really old buildings left, which is amazing considering how many earthquakes they've got. And so there's always something like ancient that you can go see. And of course, like the locals will apologize, be like, "Oh, we're sorry, this is the new version. It's only 600 years old. The original was, you know, like 3,000 years old." They're like, "Oh yeah,
that's older than my country."
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, oh yeah. So anyway, highly recommend. Sorry, I'm gonna stop now because this is an interview about you and not my experience in Japan.
Japan is one of the places I really want to get to. I love I love Japanese food. I'm really interested in Japanese culture. Their architecture is lovely. I love the whole vibe of the country. And I want to experience sort of the old stuff as well, but I also want to kind of check out, you know, the sort of neon Tokyo side of it as well. So
totally,
I'd be really interested to see Japan one day.
Yeah, do it. I recommend it. And later on, I'll actually continue gushing about it and give you suggestions. But I'm going to stop now because that's not what we're here for.
Sweet.
Bad Virginia.
So we've done a COVID briefing and a Japanese tourist board announcement. I hope that's the content you're here for.
Exactly. That's why everyone showed up, right? All right. And so out of all those places, like what, I mean, you keep coming back to Edinburgh. So presumably you like Edinburgh.
I love Edinburgh. I absolutely love Edinburgh. Yeah. I mean, I know it's my hometown, but I absolutely loved it. And I think not growing up here made me love it more because you know, living in the States as a kid, when we came back here for holidays, for family holidays, it was genuinely like kind of going back in time. It was like going to because just as we're talking about, like, you know, the US is, you know, 250 years old or whatever it is. And there are houses here older than that. Yeah. And, you know, there's a medieval castle in the middle of the city, and there's an extinct volcano in the middle of the city. Yeah. And it's just, you know, there's so much, and people kind of live on top of each other in a way that you know, and everything's huge, you know, even just down to like, you know, your garden, like people's gardens in the US or the yard. Is you know, you need a ride-on mower, whereas here it's like, you know, if you had that amount of space free, you'd put a house in it. Yeah. You know, you wouldn't have that as your front garden, because there's just so much more space there. So it's really different culturally, it's really different you know, architecturally, geographically. So it felt sort of magical coming back to this kind of, you know, this place that feels steeped in history and mythology and everything. And yeah, I love it. It's such a great city. And now that I've grown up here and now that I'm older, what I love about it is that it has the mix of that history and you know, that's steeped in the whole sort of mythology of the place, but also the really multicultural modern element of it, that we have, you know, amazing spread of, you know, different nationalities of restaurants and people living here. And you know, we have the festivals. There's you know, like I think there was like 8 festivals that happen in August. Yeah. And so, you know, I love the cultural side of the city. It feels like somewhere where, you know, when you're here, particularly when the festival's on, when you're here in town when the festival's on, it feels like you're where things are happening. It feels like you're right at the heart of something. Yeah. And there's a buzz about the city and an excitement that is just I've never experienced anywhere else. And I love it for all of that.
Yeah. Edinburgh Fringe is like, so
It's
awesome.
great.
We
It's great.
were
It's
lucky
chaos,
to
but it's
catch part
great.
of it, but yeah.
A lot of locals hate it. It's funny. A lot of locals are like, "Oh
Sure.
God, the Fringe is on again." I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm sure that if living there all the time and seeing it every year, there are probably plenty of people who are like, ugh, the actors, and they're so pushy, and all the shows, and the streets are clogged, and but plus I'm sure there's a giant influx of tourists who are there just to watch the show, so it's not just the performers and stuff. But
oh yeah, I read some mad stat along the lines of something like 2 million tourists a year come to Edinburgh. So I don't know how accurate that is, but like it feels like 2 million tourists a year.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean,
and I'm sure it feels like they're there during
like
Fringe, but
or 600,000 or something. It feels like our population tends to double during August. So
yeah, I believe it. Yeah, but it's such a cool. Yeah, it is so cool. I've only been there once for like a week, but I really loved it. So so then least favorite, yeah, let's talk about some of the places in the States you lived. I can't imagine that the south of France is like your least favorite place, so I'm going to assume that if we had to pick,
it's beautiful.
That it's going to be somewhere in the US.
It's a gorgeous place to live. The weather's incredible, and it's just a lovely place to live. Yeah, absolutely.
And the people are so nice, and the wine is amazing, and yeah, I
know. Yeah, it was cool. Well, no, it wasn't cool. It was hot. It was very hot. But it was good hot. Yeah, I mean, so the stuff I remember, I mean, it's fun. The things that you remember. So about Florida, the place we stayed in Florida, there was this little. I mean, it must have been tiny. I was 3. To me, it seemed significant, but it must have been quite a small thing. Just in the middle of this kind of apartment complex we lived in was this little pond with a palm tree, and I just remember when coming from Edinburgh to there, I mean, that sort of wet heat that they have was completely new to me. But what I remember thinking as a kid was that it was just the sort of soft, spongy turf under the grass. It was just it was, and it smelled different. It smelled that kind of green, exotic kind of, it was that. It felt tropical, I suppose, and that the palm trees everywhere and all that kind of just added to that. Whereas I remember my impression of Texas is the opposite. It was the dry heat. It was like desert. So I mean, for all that we lived in Houston, which I'm absolutely certain is not in a desert, my memories as a young kid are of Houston being much more dry and much less
drier than
lush.
Florida, but it's still pretty humid
compared to Florida. Yeah. So but then Cleveland, my big memories of Cleveland are snowdrifts up to here.
Sure.
Ohio winters, man. Yep. I remember walking to school in the full-on, snow bodysuit.
Yeah.
Just zipped up from the crotch up to your chin, basically.
Yeah.
And in fact, I remember our yard in Cleveland had a dip between ours and the one next to it. And of course, when it snowed, that leveled off. So I remember going running at one point and I tripped and went head first in the dip. My dad had to literally grab me by the ankles and lift me out. So my memory of Cleveland is a lot of snow. And then we're at New Jersey. New Jersey, we lived in a place called Woodcliff Lake, which was basically right next to a massive reservoir called Woodcliff Lake. Cool. And we had this beautiful house that was pretty much in the forest. I mean, it was our nearest neighbors were like you'd struggle to throw a rock and hit their house, I think. And our back garden sloped down to just a little river, a little brook down the back. It was just lovely.
That's place. Especially lovely as a kid.
Yeah, I loved it as a kid. And we had this incredible living room that was like the walls were all kind of like, it was almost like an arch of stone. It feels like something that like belongs in Edinburgh more than, it's like this kind of stone archway of a little room that was all, in fact, that wasn't the living room. It was a little room sort of off the kitchen.
Okay.
It was lovely. Anyway, it was a really, probably the nicest house we lived in as a kid.
That's cool.
It was really nice.
What about Wichita?
Louis,
or St. Louis,
St. Louis. We lived in St. Louis for about a year. I don't remember a lot about it, apart from the fact that I was kind of at the age where the friends I made was more important than anything else, really. Yeah. I got into bowling there. In fact, I won a bowling trophy because we had a bowling alley across the road from us. So I won a bowling trophy as a kid. I had the high. I think I had an 86 average at about 8, if that.
Wow.
If my memory is right.
Dang.
Because we had a bowling alley across the road, so I used to go bowling all the time.
Very good.
But what I remember mostly from there is that the next door neighbor became just my best mate. He was a couple of years older than me, And but being a couple of years older than me, he also introduced me to some films that were too young, you know, a couple of horror films that I was too young to be watching at that age.
Yeah.
As you do when you have older friends. So yeah, Vince was my next door neighbor, and we've got back in touch on Facebook in recent years, and it's cool to be back in touch with people like that again. And then Wichita's that was kind of my early teenage years. You know, I was there from, like, as I say, I was there from 10 to like 14.
Oh yeah.
So like I sort of went through the end of what is, in America, it's what elementary school is called, isn't it?
Middle school into high school,
I went into
right?
junior high. I was I was there. So again, it was about my friends. It was about, you know, the thing about Kansas is you really get all 4 seasons. So I remember great summers and I remember snowy winters, and you know, you really did get the 4 different seasons, and that was cool. But yeah, again, that was about, again, my next door neighbor became one of my best mates, a guy called Jeff, that again, I'm back in touch with on Facebook. Oh, nice. And most of my memories there are again about friends and stuff like that. And that, nice. Yeah, it's a great place. I do remember that Wichita has this amazing statue called the Keeper of the Plains, I think, which is this beautiful, it's like a massive Native American kind of posing like this. And there's some really great photos of it online with some amazing lightning strikes behind it. Because cool. Weather, God, yeah, tornado.
Yeah, some storms. Get some
significant weather.
Yeah.
But yeah, they all had things. I mean, those are just things that stuck with me about them. Right. You know, like, I mean, it's little things when you're a kid that stick you. Yeah. Like, one of the things I remember about Cleveland is coming home in the snow and getting in and getting out of my snowsuit, and my mum giving me a mug of hot chocolate with marshmallow stars and watching Scooby-Doo on the TV after I go home from school. And it's those kind of things that stick in your mind as a kid.
Totally. That's a good point. It's not very much about the place so much as all the people and the experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
I would like to point out to everyone watching that Justin is the kind of guy who's so kind. He just flatly refused to say anything negative about any of the places he's lived. So
I didn't even occur to me. Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's great. I mean, like, I don't want you to change anything about that now. Cause I asked about favorites and least favorites, and you just listed off a bunch of nice things about everywhere you lived. And I think that's great. And I don't even we're not going to poke that. That's just done.
Fair enough. Let's leave that alone.
Move on. So that's awesome. And I'm very pleased that you know, enjoyed your time in the US for the problematic place that it can often be.
Yes. I mean, yeah, let's not go into negatives.
Yeah.
There are reasons I wouldn't go back and live there, but none of it is the people or the place.
No, right. I mean, I'm from the US, and right now I refuse to go back and live there. And partially because I'm in a place that actually has universal healthcare at the moment, and I don't want to, or at least,
that's my number one reason.
Yeah. And I don't like the idea of going back to living where I'm constantly worried about bankruptcy because I get sick.
Same here. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly the same here. It's one of the main reasons I wouldn't go.
Yeah.
Great place to visit for holiday. We did Disney World a couple of years ago with the kids and had an absolute blast, and they loved it. And we just had an amazing couple of weeks there. It was just wonderful.
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, I mean, you know, lack of healthcare is the number one reason I wouldn't go back and live there.
Yeah, same here. Now that I've experienced the alternatives, I mean, and I'd even, like, Japan has national health care, so even going back from that to the States afterwards was like, but I did it for 3 years, and then we moved up to Canada, and I was like, maybe we'll just not go back to being paranoid about losing all of our money because we get hurt. So next up, we're going to switch gears entirely. Cool. And I swear we're going to talk about books at some point. Actually, I feel like maybe we should bump up some book questions and then go back to the other stuff.
Cool. Amazing. Let's do it.
Just to, you know, so let's talk about SPFBO. I'm going to move up all the SPFBO questions. I'm going to move them up here. And we'll do that because, sorry, I'm actually literally moving them in my questions sheet so that I know where I am. But yeah, let's talk about SPFBO. Congratulations on winning. Thanks. I don't know if I've actually like seen you and talked to you since, but congratulations on winning. Look at that selfie stick, also known as a wand.
It hasn't been stolen, contrary to
the AMA yesterday. Yeah, I read that. I was gonna ask a question, but I got to it super late. I was reading through it last night, just having a blast reading the fabulous banter between the SPFBO 6 finalists, which is always like, I don't know, it gives me the extra warm fuzzies because our own year we formed a really tight group, and seeing y'all shoot jokes and insults around the same way made me really happy.
You do. I mean, when you hang out with these people for 6 months and you're kind of the only people who can talk to each other about exactly what you're going to, you just bond and you become mates, and you do have that kind of, it's a great group of people, so it's easy to just have that kind of banter with them. It's a lot of fun.
Totally. And I feel like, and this is, I think we'll see about this year's SPFBO group, but like definitely SPFBO 5 and SPFBO 6 in a pandemic, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think that sort of ups the bonding level. It's just
I think you're right, because your only experience is online. Half the time, the only time you talk to anybody is online.
I have been in closer touch with my SPFBO 5 finalist friends than any of my other friends. Like we're in touch still, like on our group chat almost every day, and I don't talk to anybody else that often except my husband and child.
You know what we should do? We should merge them. We should see if we can we'll get a Discord server for both years and see if the banter crosses over between the two groups.
We should try that. That's a good idea. I know that at least one of our finalists won't probably join Discord, but we'll see.
Well, we just got Sean, who was our last holdout today.
Oh yeah.
He finally joined the Discord server today, okay. So we now have all 10. Zach's in charge. Zach does that kind of stuff. Zach, if you're watching, Zach, sort this out.
Yeah, just get us all in. That'd be great. Yeah. I got I was amazed that I managed to get everybody on Messenger, and Miracle has like completely blocked Facebook. But luckily, right around the same time was when the Messenger app came out, like as separate from, or actually maybe it had long existed, but whatever. Anyway, so having that. She still does our group chat on the Messenger app, but she's like hard blocked Facebook. But she has not blocked Discord, so I think we can get her in there. But nice. Yeah, that would be hilarious. So that's a good. I mean, like, I think that sort of sets the tone for like, how did you find the whole experience? We'll do an overall, and then I have some specific questions.
Sure.
After.
Mad, and weird and exciting and stressful and lovely and just an absolute roller coaster, exactly as you'd probably expect.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, it's I've told this story before, but that I entered Carpet Diem in SPFBO 4.
Oh yeah.
And bombed out really early, like in one of the first cuts.
Humor is such a hard sell, but yeah, sorry. Humor is such a hard sell sometimes.
Well, see, that would work as an excuse if Orconomics hadn't won that year. So
I didn't say it was an impossible sell. I said it's a hard sell because it's just like,
But it is subjective. I mean, everything is subjective. As I regularly say, all art is subjective, but comedy is particularly subjective, and it's just one of those things. If you land with somebody who doesn't get, if you land with somebody who doesn't have the same sense of humor as you, then you're done. You're toast. That's it. Yeah. There's no way back from that. So it's just, c'est la vie. But so yeah, I had that experience of my first SPFBO, but I followed it. I kept an eye on what was happening with it. And I knew that when I got Lost War out that I wanted to enter it. And initially I had hoped to have it out in time to get it in 5.
Our year.
Your year.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I think I was about a month late in getting it published in order to get in for that. And I was like, well, okay, fair enough. I'll put it in next year. And I feel that worked out well because it means I didn't have to go up against Miracle and sort of, is it Kaigan or Kagan? I've heard said both. It's Kaigan.
It's sort of
didn't have to go up against sort of Kaigan, which is probably in my best interests, I feel.
It's in everyone's best interest. I knew from the moment I saw that Miracle had entered, I was like, well, I know who's winning, but it'll be fun to see how far I can get.
Let's see who comes second.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard nothing but incredible things about that. And so that's another one that's on my, when I finish reading all the stuff I really need to read, I got to read that.
Yeah.
I've got it on my Kindle, just waiting. So
just bring a box of tissues.
So yeah, I'll do that. So I mean, I think that obviously was that worked in my favor, that little quirk of fate. And so, but I came in like anything better than being cut in week 1 is an improvement. So that's cool. So at every step, it's like, you know, when I made the semis, I was like, yay, fantastic, still in, wonderful. And then when I made the finals, I was like, wow, okay, this is really cool. And then after the first 2 reviews, I was on a ridiculous score, like 9.25 or something. And I was like, holy wow. But, you know, you still got that fear that's like, well, does this work in my favor or against me? Like, are people gonna see this coming in with this high score and be like,
expectations
I'm going to either subconsciously, I'm going to knock this down. It's not going to be as good as they think it is. Or it's that whole thing of when something's really hyped up, you expect it to be a certain level. And then if it doesn't quite reach that level, you end up marking it down. And it's so it was like, oh, could this be a double-edged sword? Could this end up going against me? And in the end, it got to be an awful lot more closer than it started out, obviously. Fletch was not a long way away from catching up with me. So it easily could have gone the other way. But I mean, that was at that point when I remember when Kitty's review came out, I was just like, this is insane. Oh my God. And it was just incredible. It was so amazing. So yeah, I mean, overall, an absolutely brilliant experience.
Yeah, that's awesome. I followed SPFBO 6 fairly closely because it's just because I think it's more like I hadn't really heard of SPFBO before the year I entered it, and so I had sort of like JC Kong is actually the one who told me about it, and I had followed like the tail end of SPFBO 4. And then sort of enough to like see who the winner was. And then I entered SPFBO 5. And of course I followed that, but I didn't even get into the community too much until I was suddenly a finalist, much to my surprise. And then suddenly I felt like I was actually like in things, but now I'm like, I really enjoy it. And I like watching all the reviews come in, and I don't actually, I kind of skim them because I actually hate spoilers, like so much so that I don't, you know, like, and the judges are good about mostly not spoiling like major plot points. But I like pretty much any review of a book has too much information in it for me for my reading preferences. Like I like going in blind.
My stepdaughter will not watch trailers for films because she wants to go in completely blind. So it's like similar kind of thing. She just will not watch trailers.
I actually don't do that for movies, but maybe I should. But yeah, I like to go, like for books, I kind of like to go in blind. Like I'll read the blurb, and those are often more spoilerful than I like, but I'll usually do that just to get an idea. But yeah, I'm not into the reviews that talk about like the actual plot points and stuff at all. So I will skim and see things, but yeah, I like to check it out and I like to follow it. So I actually followed y'all's SPFBO fairly eagerly, and now I'm enjoying following this one, and sort of almost forgetting that I'm entered into it. Like I'm sort of just watching how everyone else is doing, and I'm just like, hey, this is fun.
Oh yeah, also I've got a book in this.
Yeah, right. Like, oh right, I guess that's a thing. But so I have some idea of how things rolled out for you, was the whole point of that non sequitur. Sure. But I'm curious as to, and I asked this about any SPFBO entrant, is how do you think it affected your sales and visibility? And then we'll talk more about like what did you get out of the community, and then actually winning. So let's start with that. Sales and visibility. What were your thoughts on that?
Big bumps. A noticeable bump after making the finals, and a massive spike in sales after winning.
Nice.
And that maintained that higher level for a good couple of months afterwards.
Nice.
And it's still ticking along nicely. It's still outselling. I mean, I only have the 2 books out at the moment, and Carpe Diem's been out a lot longer. It first came out in 2015 with a small press, and then I republished it in 2018. And they're both still, you know, ticking along, but Lost Word is ticking along at a higher level than Carpe Diem is ticking along at. So,
gotcha. Cool.
So yeah, I mean, absolutely, definitely increased my visibility. Got me reviews from a lot of blogs and reviewers that some of which I didn't know existed, some of which were like really big names. Sort of, there was one, I'm rubbish with names, but there's one big name American vlogger who picked it up and reviewed it, and I literally saw a spike that day that his review came out.
Gotcha.
So yeah, I mean, it did loads. It was massive in terms of increasing sales and visibility.
Yeah. Was that Daniel Green?
That sounds right. Yeah, I really am rubbish with names.
No, it's all right. I think I remember seeing that he reviewed. I don't actually follow his channel, but he comes like shows up in my Twitter feed periodically, and I think I saw that one by.
Yes, I think that could be right. Yeah,
and he has a huge number of followers, so pretty much any book he reviews, even if he hates it, probably gets sales. Like if he just talks about a book, it's like probably. But I think he actually really enjoyed it, so that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a good review. It was a really good review.
Yeah, and I've seen it now, like in the wild, in terms of like, just showing up in my Instagram feed or whatever, where like people reviewing it and reading it, putting pictures of it up and stuff, which is nice.
It's lovely. I love seeing a review and I'm like, I have no idea who this person is. I've never spoken to them. And here's this really cool review that they did. I love it.
Yeah, that's so cool. Best feeling, really, because you're like, people great. I don't know are actually legitimately reading my book. That is like,
it's great fun. It never gets old. It never gets old. It's just so much fun. There was a woman on Twitter the other day who she had tagged me in a post about she liked my about the author page because of the Firefly reference, and that was at the end of a thread of her kind of, as she was reading the book, she was occasionally taking photographs of paragraphs that she liked and talking about them, and she was just excited about stuff, and she was really enthusiastic about it. And I went back and read through it, and I was like, that's made my day. That was great. I really enjoyed that. I'm so pleased that she enjoyed it so much and she picked out some stuff that I particularly wanted to put in. And I was like, I love it when a reader really gets what I was trying to do. That's great.
Those are the best reviews ever. It's just you just like when you read them and they've pulled quotes and they've been like, and then how this does this, and you're like, like, because
when somebody pulls a quote of something that's like, I was particularly pleased with that scene, you're like, yes, nailed it, love it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. I'm so glad you're seeing a lot of that. That's so cool.
It's great. Yeah, it's lovely.
And so it's continuing with the warm fuzzies. What did you get out of the SPFBO community?
I mean, the easy answer is some new friends,
right?
Because I now know a load of other indie authors I didn't know before, and they know me, and so that's brilliant, and I get to do things like this, talk to you, and so I mean, it's a lovely community. It's from a business perspective, you could call it good networking, but I much prefer it being a community of people that are just passionate about the same stuff I'm passionate about. It's great. And totally. Everybody is, the thing about this community is everybody's very supportive of each other. There's no there is a competition because there's SPFBO, but it's
not really a competition.
It's not like a zero-sum game where it's like you have to lose so I can win. And so people are just really kind and supportive of each other and generous with their time, and it's just a really lovely community. It's so nice to be part of.
I agree. It's just, as you say, super supportive and super, I mean, that's the thing, right? I feel like a lot of authors starting out worry about competition and, other authors and stuff. But I hope that if the SPFBO community teaches people anything, it's that's not the thing. Like, even when you're actually in a competition with people, like really,
very true.
When your book is literally stacked against theirs for scoring and stuff, and they still become your best friend because it's out of your control, right? Like, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it seems like y'all had a similar number of jokes about offing each other, et cetera, in order to win. We did the same thing.
Mostly Fletch trying to assassinate me. That was the recurring theme.
Yeah. And fair enough. We had a bunch of jokes about one of our members sending us poison cakes to try to off the competition and stuff. But the truth is that, like you joke about that because it's funny amongst friends, right? It's not funny with non-friends. Anyone watching, please, like, jokes about killing people are not funny unless you're doing it with people who 100% are sure that you don't mean it.
If they don't know that you're not definitely going to do that, then that's a win.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't want to pretend that we condone death threats. We don't. But amongst good friends, those kinds of jokes are kind of funny. But the thing is that it wouldn't do any good, right? Like, the reason it's not actually a competition once you've entered is because there's nothing you can do about your book and how it's going to do, right? Like, all you can do is still sit there and hold on to your seat. And so the people who are in the same situation are just your friends. Like they're the people experiencing the same thing as you.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like sport where you got to go out and compete directly against each other, and that it does become a zero-sum game where it's just like you've done your bit, you've written your book, you've handed in, that's it. At that point, all you've got is the waiting for the next year.
Yeah.
So you might as well hang out with some people who are going to be able to sympathize with what you're going through.
Totally. And I feel like what I want to project is that extends to the rest of publishing, because it is a similar competition in that once your book is out, you can't actually affect like whether or not people are going to like it. All you can do is try to get more people to see it. And guess what? Having author friends is a great way to do that, because people read more than one book. They read more than one book in a year at a time, in like any given day. So you always, like there's no upshot to trying to feel competitive about it.
No.
So
I mean, you're absolutely, and the reason, so Lost World was doing okay. It was doing pretty well before SPFBO. And the main reason for that is because Anna Stevens is a mate of mine, and she read Lost World for me really early on and reviewed it. And and her review led to Patrick from
Novel Notions.
Yes, from Novel Notions reviewing it, and his review gave me a massive uptick in sales and attention, which was brilliant. And then
shout out to Patrick.
Uptick. Hi, Patrick.
Yeah,
thanks, Patrick.
Exactly.
And then him reviewing it got other reviewers to review it. So then other reviewers started picking up because he had reviewed it. And that all just came back to Anna's review, because Patrick got it from Anna's review. So exactly as you say, author friends are a useful business thing to have beyond just the fact that it's nice to have author friends. I mean, author friends are basically like, as an author, being an author is a really solitary life, really. And it can be easy to kind of feel very like, when you're sitting in a room by yourself, it can be very easy to start feeling like what you're doing is going nowhere and nobody's ever going to read it. And it can start to feel like you're kind of screaming into a void. But your author mates are the ones they're your co-workers you can chat to. You just have to do it virtually because you're all sitting in different rooms. But they're the kind of people who are there to keep you sane and sympathize with the stuff you're struggling with, and bitch to you about the stuff they're struggling with. And absolutely, it's a very healthy and positive relationship to have, is to have other author friends.
Yeah, for sure. So anyone watching, if you haven't already joined a community like the SPFBO one, then try it out, because author friends are the best friends to have if you're an author yourself.
Straight up, definitely.
And also the super cool thing about SPFBO is making reviewer friends, because that like speaking of sort of the unintentional beneficial business consequences of that, but like there are now a number of blogs that I would have really struggled to sort of, and I'm so bad at like the cold email, like please read my book, and I just actually have completely stopped doing that now, but only because I'm super lucky, and because I was a finalist in SPFBO, there are now a handful of blogs that absolutely I can just email them and say, hey, do y'all have, are you interested in maybe reviewing this new book? Or do you what about, would you be interested in like showing off my covers? Because I did a cover redesign, that sort of thing. And that's like, and a bunch of the people being like, oh yeah. Or even just like asking on the Twitterverse, just like saying, hey, does anybody have any interest in reading this? And then having actual big fantasy blogs say, oh yeah, we'll take a copy.
Yeah, it's great.
Right. And that's like, wow, okay. That was not a thing I could do before.
Yeah, and that's exactly one of the great things SPFBO does from a visibility perspective. Is it lets people know that you are somebody that it's worth reading your books. Essentially, it helps you stand out above the masses of people who are doing exactly what you were describing, which is cold emailing people and saying, please read my book.
Yeah.
And this is a way of SPFBO is a way of helping you stand out from that and make people pay attention, basically.
Yeah, totally. And that reviewer community is just so sweet and dedicated and hardworking, and they love shining spotlights on indie books. It's just so cool.
Exactly.
I really shout out to all those reviewers, by the way. If you are a SPFBO blogger or ever have been, thank you for your hard work, because that's super awesome.
Absolutely.
We all appreciate it so much.
And I've met quite a few of them as well at cons. I highly recommend go to cons.
Yes.
Go to cons.
Yes, absolutely.
If you want to meet people, because A, it's just lovely to hang out with them and drink, and B, it's the best place to actually get to know people, you know, on a one-to-one human level. It's great fun.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I really, really miss conventions. I can't wait till they come back. I'm signed up to do one in September, but I don't know that I'll actually be able to go because...
Same here. There's one, the FantasyCon this year is running at the end of September. And I'm signed up for it, and I'm really hoping that it'll be cool to go to it. But I don't know, man. England is a worry. Even more so than Scotland. England is a worry. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. We'll have to wait and see.
Totally. The one that I'm supposed to go to is in the States. I'm also signed up to do like my local con in October, and I think that'll be fine, hopefully, unless we're in the middle of another wave, because who knows, right?
Who knows? I mean, we kind of have to play it by ear, don't we?
Yeah. But anyway, but yes, I agree. Go to cons, folks. Okay, so let's get down to it. How did winning feel?
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. It was absolutely fantastic. It took a little while to sink in. Like my wife had to ask, she's like, has it sunk in yet? No, doesn't feel real yet.
No.
Waiting for it to sink in. So it took literally probably a couple of days to properly sink in.
Yeah.
But it was mad. It was just so, you know, the excitement, because we kind of knew we were getting down to the last few days, and so we knew the final reviews were going to come out. So it was like, you know, any day now, we're going to find out any day now. And then the last two reviews for Lost War landed on the same day. And it was like a quick mental calculation of, right, what do these scores mean? And then realized, and then of course Mark very quickly did a sort of official winners post, as he said, because as soon as it was mathematically certain, that was that. And it was just surreal. It was weird. I haven't actually spoken to any of the previous winners about how they felt about it, about whether or not they had the same experience. But it was at first it was almost like relief. It was like it was the release of the stress.
Right, just it being done. Yeah.
It was just kind of like, oh wow, okay, amazing. And then it just took me a little while to get kind of excited about it and be like, this is awesome. What was really lovely, actually, I think probably what got me excited about it, what got me kind of really pumped up about it, was just the outpouring of congratulations that I got. Like my phone just went nuts for 24 hours of people congratulating me and sending me really nice messages and stuff. And it was just like, that was amazing. That was just that whole community of outpouring of, you know, celebration was that felt great. That was really nice.
That sounds like a lovely experience. I know, I think Miracle was a bit overwhelmed when she won. I won't talk for her because, of course, she's not here. But if I recall correctly at the time, she was sort of just like, because she'd also been in the process of like pulling herself away from social media. And so like the sudden influx of like, and feeling like, I think that she, you know, like she needed to respond to stuff, but I will, that's, you know, my unofficial secondhand report. Everyone should wait for Miracle to comment on it herself or go find an interview where she already has before they take my word for it. And then other than that, you know, I haven't actually asked that many other previous winners about how it felt for them, but is there like, so we've established that SPFBO is absolutely wonderful and the community is wonderful and the competition itself does amazing work to highlight independent books. That said, there is not anything in this world that is perfect. And therefore, I think it's always a worthwhile question to ask. Is there anything that you would do to improve the competition or change the competition in some way if you could, magic wand, etc.?
So funnily enough, this was asked at the AMA we all did yesterday as well, which was the first time I had ever thought about it because it hadn't crossed my mind. And genuinely, I can't personally think of anything that came to mind that was like, that would have been better. I wish they'd done this differently, or anything like that. I mean, the whole thing is a voluntary endeavor by everybody involved in it, and so, you know, it almost feels like saying, well, this could be better is just a bit churlish, really. But genuinely, I can't think of anything. One thing that I can't remember who suggested it, but one of the other guys said that I thought, well, maybe that's worth considering was that that potentially maybe there should be a rule that nobody can DNF a finalist. And I feel like maybe that's worth discussing, but really it's down to the reviewers to make that kind of decision. You know, it's not, it's, I feel like, you know, it's down to them and Mark to discuss that kind of stuff if they want to, because the thing I said after, when I won it last year, no, it wasn't, it was this year. God, it feels like last year. What year is it?
Well, it was technically the 2021, right? And so even though you won it this year, it was last year's competition.
April, wasn't it?
I know,
it really was only April.
But it's been a long couple months since then.
It's been a long 18 months.
Yeah,
it doesn't feel like it was only a few months ago. That's mad. That's a reality check. As I said, when I won it a few months ago, you know, the actual rules of the competition only ask the reviewers to review their finalist and their favorite of the other finalists, and that's it.
Yeah.
So like every other review, exactly. Every other review that gets written is entirely above and beyond. And so, I mean, it's just mostly I'm just grateful that everybody puts the effort in to do it, and that, you know, that it happens, that Mark has used his platform to publicize it and make it happen, and that all the reviewers who get involved in it every year put in the time, because I'm reading for Booknest this year, and I'm putting in the time to read my batch of books, and it's a time commitment, and it's not something, you know, you don't get paid for it, you don't get anything out of it apart from the pleasure of the experience and being part of it. So I mean, really, I feel like how they want to do it, it's up to them. It's almost their competition to decide how they want to run it. And
absolutely,
you know, it's maybe not a bad suggestion, but really, it's up to them.
Who are we to suggest? No, and I think that's an excellent point, right? Like even asking the question, I don't mean it as a, like, you know, SPFBO should change because we say so or anything like that. No, because it's a massive donation of time from all of those bloggers and from Mark Lawrence himself. And so, and you're right, they're unpaid and unsung for the most part. Like, I think I like to thank them as often as possible, but I think most people who wind up even like as semifinalists or beyond tend to spend some time thanking the judges. Absolutely. But it's not like, you know, that we, you know, get to throw them a massive party or anything, though we probably should. That'd be sweet. Can you imagine if we had like an in-person SPFBO hang once the pandemic is over? We just
that'd be amazing. I would be absolutely down for that.
I would bake a cake for the judges personally or something, you know, like buy people drinks. That would be fun.
That would be awesome. That's a really good idea. We should just like have a one-off, maybe in a few years, like for SPFBO 10.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great idea.
Have a massive get together of everybody in the community for SPFBO 10.
For sure.
Gives us time to plan it and for COVID to be done, obviously.
Oh yeah. God. I really hope it's not another 3, because we're in 7 now, right? So it's be 3 more. Yeah. But like, okay, but still 3-4 more years to. Yeah. But yes, I agree. That would be SPFBO 10 would be a good time for that. That'd be fun. So no, I don't think that anyone owes us anything in that regard. But I do think I think it's always worth, like, you know, thinking critically about the things that we love. Like I think like I like to do that about art and artists and everything and competitions as well. So I always think it's worth considering. Not totally.
I completely agree. I mean, you know, if there was something genuine, I mean, I think, and as well, I think the organizers and the judges would be open to feedback. If there was something that, you know, a number of authors were like, hey, this is a thing that is unpleasant or could be better. Could we look at changing this? I think they'd be absolutely open to it.
Yeah.
I don't know that there is a massive thing that that needs to be fixed. So
they are open to feedback. Actually, Mihir like called me after the last year's it's not last year's now, whatever, SPFBO, after SPFBO 5 finished, and asked if if the SPFBO 5 finalists collectively had any feedback to give. And actually, I think he sent us a survey, and then at one point we were talking over the phone about like the results of that survey and stuff. And and a couple of things were nudged a bit because of our feedback. And it wasn't anything massive, and it wasn't anything like this is horrible or anything, but it was just a couple of suggestions based on our own personal experiences with it. And some things got shifted a little bit because of it. Mainly in terms of doesn't actually matter what it was, but it was all small stuff, and none of it was, but so I would say that, they absolutely are open to feedback. Sorry, my elderly dog is tripping over my daughter's Duplo.
Hi, doggy.
Yeah, she's back there. I would show her on camera, except my house is such an insane mess. Is she okay?
Oh, I have carefully tidied my office just within the frame of this shot, so all the mess is out of shot. It's fine.
Normally, that's true of mine as well, but I'm looking behind me and realizing that some of the mess is actually on top of this shelf back here. Anyway, but luckily it's distant enough, I'm not sure anyone can even tell that there's like a stack of papers on top of me.
It looks deliberate. It's fine. You're good.
Oh yeah, it's great. Yeah. But okay, she's found a comfortable place to lie down. Everything is fine. The dog is 15 and a half, and she's got some issues with mobility, and so but she did actually manage to just like make a lap. So okay, we've established that SPFBO is amazing, and that's, we don't need to change anything ourselves, but if the reviewers ever feel like changing anything, that's their call, which I think is perfectly reasonable. I'm looking at the chat here to see if there are any new questions coming in, and we've got you can never have too many dice. I could listen to traveling kids talk about their impressions of various homes forever. So Crystal was a big fan of that topic. So that's nice.
Sweet. Hey, we accidentally gave you the content you came for. Fantastic.
That's woohoo. And actually, Crystal also asks, any advice for surviving phase 1 with some shred of nerves left?
Whiskey. Good single malt.
Yep.
Yeah.
And this is Crystal Matar, so I believe that is an answer she will appreciate.
Yes, I have the impression Crystal likes whiskey. So yes, yeah. Good single malt, preferably from Islay. I recommend Lagavulin.
There you go. Excellent. Solid response. I would similarly say, I mean, it's so hard to say. Like, I would say to try not to worry about it, because we've literally done everything you can at this point. Yeah. But that's way easier said than done. I remember being a ball of nerves the first time. But the funny thing is that the second time around, I'm like, I don't, I just expect to be cut. Like, I expect to be cut immediately.
I think that's the best approach, actually. If you go in it, expect it. That's actually, let's go back and rewind, and I'll give an actual sensible answer instead of just encouraging alcoholism. That's a really good point, actually. If you go into it with no expectations, it will be much easier on you. I think I went into 4 with more kind of hopes upon what I might achieve with my first book, and so was pretty gutted when it was cut. But that gave me the ability to come into 6 without that, and with the expectation that anything was a bonus.
Right.
And so that's a really good approach, I think. Expect nothing.
Yeah. And be pleased with whatever you get.
Anything positive that happens will just be a positive.
Yeah. That seems legit. Yeah. I mean, I tried to go in the first time around with that mentality, just like expecting to get cut, deciding I was going to be thrilled if I even made semifinalist. And that was true, but there's some unconscious part of your brain. It's really hard to shut up about that stuff.
Oh, totally. Absolutely.
And so there was a fair amount of nerves with that. Although once I made semifinalist, I was like, okay, well, that's it. Like, that's obviously the only thing that it's going to happen. So great, yay, go me. Like, I did the thing that I was hoping to do. And so then I kind of I genuinely was shocked and amazed when Blade's Edge made finalist, because I was like, I thought I was done. Like, I thought this was like, I had just already in my brain been like, the competition is over. There's no way I'm going any farther than that. So
sure.
Yeah. So that was weird. And then this time I'm just like, I'm legit just expecting to get cut immediately. Like, I'm like, I don't know, why would Cyro's Claw? Now that I know how much luck is involved in making it even the
Yeah, I mean,
semifinalists,
it depends. It depends who you land with. It depends who reads it. Unless they find one reviewer to read all 300 books,
right.
then every year it's going to be down to the luck of who you land with and who gets it and who you connect with
and what their other books are. Right.
Yeah,
because we've already established, like, if Sword of Kaigen had been in my group, there's no way I would have advanced to the next round, right? And if and like and if like and it's just like it. So it really depends. Like if you, especially when you get put in a group where you're like your team is doing like 6 books each, right? And then like if you have 2 good books that you really like, you have to pick one of them.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you might have made both of them a semifinalist, but you're not allowed to do that. So you get to put forth one semifinalist, and boo-hoo for like, so then a book that you loved and could have been a semifinalist gets cut in the first round. And so there's just there's so much chance behind it that I seriously, I think you just have to embrace that. When you're in it, just be like, remember how much chance is involved. Crystal and anyone else who's watching, like, is just, it's not, you can't take it personally because it's just absolutely
you can't. Once you've written your book and handed it in, there's nothing you can do. But having said that, I totally relate to what you were saying. There will always be that little golden ball in your chest that's like, but what if? What if? and I don't think it's possible to kill that. You just have to let that be there. Yeah. And just let it live there. But the more you can kind of just be, taking it from the perspective of anything good that comes out of it as a bonus, the easier it will be not to have a heart attack in the next, few months.
Yeah, totally.
And good luck with that.
Yeah. Good luck, everyone. And I do think it's sort of like, because of the way it's set up and the number of reviewers who are now reviewing even the books they cut, which is, as you say, going way above and beyond, right? Yeah. If you can get a nice review out of SPFBO, if that's all you get out of it is one nice review from one of the judges, that's amazing. Just like eat that up, enjoy it, you quote it for the rest of your life, but just like,
it's a review you wouldn't get otherwise.
Exactly. And it was free. All you had to do was enter your book, and there was no exchange of anything except someone's time. And so, if you get a nice review out of SPFBO, and that's sort of, I think that I went in with that. I was like, I just really hope that whoever gets me doesn't hate the book, right? Like it would be nice if they said some nice things about it. And actually Bookborn has already said a couple nice things about it. She did her initial, like, she's reviewing without scoring on her book blog first, and then so that's nice. I feel like I'm like, okay, check. So great, I got that. I got nice things said about the book, and now I'm gonna go back to not worrying.
Everything else is jam.
Yeah. All right, so moving on, let's see if we have any other questions here. Anita says that Daniel Green's channel is great. A&P Adventures.
I lost your sound there for a second. I don't know what you said.
Oh, hello? Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're back. No, you're back.
Oh, okay.
You just cut out for a second while you were reading whatever you were reading.
That's weird. I was just reading the chat. Can you hear me now? Okay.
I can.
Okay, I was just checking, making sure it wasn't from me changing screens. But so Anita says Daniel Green's channel is great. Someone called A&P Adventures says, I'm not a reviewer or judge, but I would like to go to that party, please. Yeah, fair enough.
I think it can be open for readers as well. I think just an open invitation to anybody who wants to come, really.
Probably just, like make it, or we can make it like a weekend long con type thing, like except it's just us hanging out, but like, and maybe there would be a party for like officially involved people, and then, but also a party for just anybody who wants to.
We'll just hire a massive like chalet or something, and it'll be cool.
Ooh, good idea. There are lots of castles near you, right?
There are. Not many of them have roofs on them, though. It's a bit of a worry.
I'm sure I could put up a tent. It'd be fine.
Yeah.
And then Pam says, does Justin know he's booked to lead the panel at QuaranCon 2022? Right. We just started a tradition of having the previous winner of SPFBO lead, or be the moderator for the SPFBO panel for the next year.
Like Miracle did for us this year.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We can just turn that into a tradition if you like. Although
he knows now. Yeah, sure. Why not? I'm in for that. Why not?
I think Pam just came up with that, but it seems like a reasonable tradition. So you could interview the SPFBO 7 finalists.
I will do that. So whoever gets through to the finals, I will do that. That sounds good. I'll do that. Definitely.
Assuming that they, actually want to talk to us. Oh, it's Anna. Oh, hi, Anna. Sorry, Anna is a Twitter buddy of mine. I believe if it's Anna, yeah, it's Anna. I think I can. It's so hard to
see Anna.
The tiny little pictures there. Anna's awesome, by the way. She does cosplay and cosplay photography.
Oh, sweet.
And like on a massive scale, like her photos are amazing. So
cool.
You should check those out sometime if you have a chance. Okay, now next up, we're moving back to my questions because we are out of random Twitter comments or not Twitter, YouTube comments for the moment. Let's switch gears entirely. We've talked about books for a second. SPFBO, Schmifbo, tell me about acting.
Oh God, yeah. So once upon a time I wanted to be an actor. So I got into it at school. And then I got into a local rep company about the age of 16. We have the Edinburgh Fringe on our doorstep, so we did the Edinburgh Fringe.
Nice.
And tended to do that every year, did a couple of shows a year, went up to university, joined the University Theatre Company in Dundee. And we, while I was there, me and a friend of mine, Ambrose, had this idea that we would be the first company to bring a show down to the Fringe from Dundee University. So we did. It was Braveheart 2, Brave Harder.
That sounds amazing.
And we did them. It was brilliant because the show wasn't brilliant. The show was a student panto with lots of sex jokes, but it was a lot of fun. It was a comedy. But not long before we came down, Braveheart won the Oscar. And so the Fringe program actually featured us in their PR release about doing Braveheart to Braveheart. So we were a debut company,
and you had sold out
first night. Yeah, we sold out our first night. And we were a debut company doing the show for the first, and literally I remember because the changing rooms, the green room were downstairs. We came up the stairs towards the backstage area, and the president of the company was sort of standing peeking out, and she was just like, "It's full." It's just like, no way, because the average Fringe audience is something like 3. There's a lot of shows at the Fringe where you get hardly anybody there. There's a lot of shows that don't get anybody for some shows. Because there are so many shows. So for us to be doing our debut show, this was in what, 96.
Yeah.
It was our debut show on the Fringe for the University Company. We had a few things going for us. So one of the guys in the cast, his uncle was Quentin Blake. So Quentin Blake does all the famous illustrations for Roald Dahl.
Oh, okay, yep.
So Quentin Blake did a drawing of the main character. So it was ostensibly me, but it was basically the main character. He did a drawing of that in his style for our poster, to the point where people were stealing our posters because it had a Quentin Blake. They were like, "Oh, because
that's a print."
So we had to go around and keep putting more posters up because they kept getting nicked because they had a Quentin Blake drawing on them.
My gosh, that's amazing.
And so we had that going for us as well. We had the whole Oscar thing. So I mean, a lot fell in our favor, and we did a lot of hard work on promo stuff as well, to be fair.
Nice, yeah.
But yeah, so
having Fringe actually promote your show themselves is huge.
That was great. That was great. So yeah, I mean, we were we were at a venue called Diverse Attractions, which was based then in what was the original Traverse Theatre in Edinburgh. It's closed now, I think, but it was the original Traverse Theatre in Edinburgh. And we were their first ever debut company to sell out their opening night. Of the Fringe. So it was amazing. It was so good. So
that's so cool.
Yeah, it was a great fun. And I considered doing it professionally. I even went as far as a friend of mine and I, who were both in the company, went down and tried out for RADA. Neither of us got in. And then I kind of, at that point in time, I was engaged by that point to my university girlfriend. And the lifestyle of acting was slightly, it was a bit, well, let's go back to peripatetic, since I used that already earlier in the conversation. So it was, I went to, did a couple of auditions in London, but wanted to stay up in Edinburgh. And so the lifestyle just wasn't really ideal. And so I started thinking about other things. And then I kind of fell into jobs working in little small publishing companies and just kind of drifted away from it, and then came to writing instead.
Nice. Fair enough. I'm so tickled that you had a sold out show in an Edinburgh Fringe. That's just like, I've done Winnipeg Fringe, which is weirdly the biggest fringe in North America, which I didn't know after I'd done it. So, but it is still a tiny fringe compared to Edinburgh. Sure. Original and best, right? So just the thought of y'all having a sold out show for a debut company on your first night, that's just crazy town.
And we sold out most nights. I think the one night we didn't sell out was Wednesday, which is like traditionally the quietest day of a run in the Fringe. I think Wednesday was the only night we didn't sell out. I think we sold out almost every night.
Yeah. Amazing. It
was great, and it was such a silly show. It was so, and in fact, what was funny was we had the guy who came to review it from the Scotsman. He was like talking about the historical inaccuracies in it and slating it, like he slagged it off, and he described me. So I played as he was called, Big Wally Wallace, and he described me as having a certain tea towel pulchritude, which led me to go and look up what the hell pulchritude meant.
So like bonus points for using pulchritude.
Exactly. And then he was like, they've confused this character with that character, and we're like, dude, have you seen the post? Did you think this was going to be historically accurate? Like, also, you seem to have missed the point.
Did you not get that this was a parody from the outset? Like, this is
this is basically William Wallace, the student panto with adult themes. That's and you're slating it for being historically inaccurate. It's like, dude, there are blowjob jokes in here. You've missed the point of this. You've missed the point of this entirely.
That's ridiculous.
It was funny, but we actually got people coming to see it from having read that review. There were people like, well, if he hates it, I might like it. So it worked out.
All right. Well, there you go. People, if that reviewer has a reputation that serves the purpose, that works.
In fact, I remember, it's funny, I remember literally one night overhearing somebody in the audience as they were leaving saying, yeah, no wonder blah 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 hated this. But talking about it in positive, like, oh, that was great, no wonder he hated this. It was like, okay, so people know what he likes and doesn't like, that's fine.
Excellent. That probably sold you some tickets then. That's brilliant.
I think it did.
And that's that segs nicely back into books again, because it's like a brilliant 1-star review that slags like all the best things about the book. Like anytime someone uses the word woke, the phrase woke nonsense, for example, it's just sort of like, okay, I probably want to read that.
yeah, me too.
Describes, this progressive nonsense full of all the token blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, good. So it's a diverse book then. Thanks. I'll take that. I'll go,
yeah, exactly. Oh, look, representation in fantasy. How dare you?
Yeah. How dare you? Or a specific example that we were chatting about before we actually went live was the some people get really upset about cursing in fantasy, and sometimes that can play to your favor.
They do, and it's a really, I mean, so for anyone who doesn't know, the first word on the first page of The Lost War is fuck, and I didn't check with you beforehand if I could swear in this. So,
you absolutely can. Yeah, it's QuaranCon. We're not a family-friendly show. We never have been.
Sweet.
So.
So yeah, I've had reviews where I had somebody reviewing it basically saying, I only read the first word and I put it down this horrible filth. What am I supposed to think of an author who can't come up with a better opening line than this? And I was like, that I'm not for you, and you should probably not read the book. Fine, okay. But I find it's been an effective way of finding my audience, because there are people who hear about it and like, I have to read that because that's my, and then there are other people who are like, I will never touch this needless filth. It's like, yeah, you would hate the rest of the book, so that's probably right. Good. We weeded each other out early on, and that's probably for the best.
And that is, I think, the beauty of those sort of the angry 1-star reviews, or they don't even have to be angry, but just anytime someone actually like criticizes the things they don't like specifically, because it's sort of like if someone says this book is a trash heap, then you're just like, that doesn't actually tell me anything. But if someone says, I hated that there was this, this, and this in the book, then you've still listed out the this, and this, and for the people who like that, they're gonna know that that's something they want to read. And I've absolutely purchased books off of 1-star reviews before. And I think lots of people, well, not lots, I mean, plenty of people do.
I think the highest, the first review on the UK Amazon page for Lost War is like a 3-star review for a guy basically complaining, much as what you said. I just nearly shoved my foot in my bin there while I wasn't paying attention. Much as you were saying about, that whole woke nonsense thing, it's basically, oh, this is far too BBC for my taste. All the women are powerful warriors and blah, blah, blah. And it's absolutely, and it's just like, dude, you're just selling my book to my audience for me. Thanks for that. That's fine. Thanks.
Brilliant. Yeah. Brilliant.
So I won't be reading anymore, but some will enjoy this. And I was like, yep. And you've just helped them figure out who they are. So thanks for that.
Exactly. Yeah. You don't even mind that that's like one of the most upvoted, one of the most helpful reviews. You're like, oh, that is helpful.
Exactly. It's like people who are, like people who are going to be upset about women being able to fight are not going to enjoy my book. So yeah, fine. Weed them out.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. If anyone has a problem with that, don't read my books either. It's literally the unifying theme of all my writing. Not just warriors, but like, but being strong in
just strong female characters. He seemed to just object to strong female characters, and I was like, yeah, well, okay. Then don't read any more of my books.
Yeah, exactly. Do yourself a favor and stop paying money for my books, or go ahead and give me your money, I guess, and then complain about it.
Yeah, I mean, whatever works for you.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing that cracks me up, and also a thing that I don't understand at all. I cannot imagine hate reading a series, and I've heard of multiple people doing this, where they like angrily review the first book and then go on to read the second, third, fourth, and fifth or whatever, and are just as pissed the entire time.
Yeah. Like, I don't get that at all.
What?
I don't get that. If you hate something by an author, I can't comprehend why you would read something else by that author.
No.
Like, why would you bother?
I can't.
I've read this entire series and the whole thing's garbage. Well, okay. Basically, you've just given this dude some money for reading his books. I'm thinking specifically of a friend of mine who writes crime, and I'm sure he recently said he had somebody who had like, I read this and it was rubbish, but I thought I'd give this a try, and it was rubbish too. It's like, man, just go with your instincts, really.
It is the weirdest thing, but like I put books down all the time, and don't pick them, don't pick them back. Like I DNF books left, right, and center, and so I can't even imagine finishing a book I wasn't enjoying. Let alone reading the whole rest of the series. And
then reviewing it to say how awful it was. It was their fault for writing a book you didn't enjoy and still decided to read anyway.
Yep.
So I'd like to complain about this stick. I've been beating myself with it for 3 days and my back really hurts.
Yeah, exactly. This stick is awful. 1 star. Maybe try rating your hand. I don't. Your arm. I don't. Anyway. It is a weird thing, but people are strange and they've all got their hobbies, I guess. So there we go. So I feel like we covered acting and then we swung back into writing, which works because the next question is, speaking of 1-star, I don't want to say speaking of 1-star reviews, but speaking of hard sells, humorous urban fantasy. Which I'm actually I'm just making a guess at the urban fantasy. I've read the blurb for Carpet Diem. It seems...
You're absolutely right. It is humorous urban fantasy.
Like it's always, I find, I don't know, I have a humorous urban fantasy series. I feel like it's a harder sell than my non-humorous books because humor is, as we were discussing before we started going live, that humor is just it's tricky. Or maybe we actually said this in this conversation, but that it's like, it's just tricky. It's a tricky sell because
it's so subjective. Exactly.
And people have to have this sort of the same sense of humor that you do in order to appreciate it. And I personally, I think, have a very niche and nerdy sense of humor. So I never really expected my humorous urban fantasy series to take off all that well. But yeah, so like that's my experience with it. But how has it been for you? You actually said though that like Carpe Diem does sell well, not as well as Lost War, but does tick along on
So
its.
I mean, at the same stage of its publishing, it probably was selling about similar levels. Well, certainly up until Lost War 1 SPFBO, certainly it was probably selling at the same kind of levels. I mean,
Okay.
it's sold. I mean, it's been out sort of, several years more. If you take up all the sales from when it was published with the small press, and then again when I self-published it, if you add all that together, then it has sold substantially. It's probably sold more than double what Lost War has sold.
Okay.
But then Lost War's only been out for coming up 3 years now.
Okay.
So yeah, it's got a there's some crossover between the audiences as well. So some people who came to me for Carpet Diem have really enjoyed Lost War.
Oh, cool.
What I found interesting is people who've come to me for Lost War, quite a few of them have gone back and read Carpet Diem, been like, this is like it was written by a completely different author. I don't like this at all. And it's like, yeah, fair enough. It is a very different style. They're two very different books, and I like writing stuff in different styles. So I'm gonna come across that. Like I have plans for when I finish the Eden series, whenever that will be. I have plans to do stuff that's also different from both of those two things. I am just going to write different stuff because I write what I'm excited about and what I enjoy, and writing sort of new stuff. And I'm not the kind of writer who's going to end up just, writing 27 novels in the same series about the same characters for the rest of my life, because it doesn't excite me. Basically, I want to tell interesting stories in different worlds with different characters. So yeah, they're very different books, and some people cross over and like both. Most people that have told me they've read both have much preferred one over the other, but also like the other one. So it's really interesting, and it goes both ways. It absolutely goes both ways. But yeah, you're right. It is a harder sell. I submitted Carpet Diem before I got it published by the small press. I submitted it to a few agents. I mean, not a lot of agents, maybe a dozen in total, I think.
It's a fair chunk.
And I got some positive feedback, but one of the things that stuck with me was that comedy fantasy is a hard sell because bookshops don't have a comedy fantasy section. They have a Terry Pratchett shelf.
Fair.
And that is basically what it came down to. And I was like, well, look, I've sold now like, X thousand copies of this, but maybe bookshops should have a comedy fan. Like, Tom Holt, Jasper Ford, there's two names of the guys. In fact, look, if I lean back here, Jasper Ford, Tom.
Yeah, there you go.
These are two guys who write comedic fantasy, although Jasper Ford is a bit more, what would we call it, kind of speculative, I suppose. It's not so much fantasy as Tom Holtz is. Tom Holtz is definitely urban fantasy. But they sell well, and these are guys who have made a successful career, and there's a lot more out there.
T. Kingfisher, although it's not really urban, but it's humorous fantasy for sure. Like, I don't know if you've read any T. Kingfisher stuff, but she writes.
I haven't.
She writes funny fantasy that
reminds
me of Pratchett in a lot of ways, although it's not as humorous. Like, I think romance is actually more her genre, but it's so like she's definitely a conglomeration of genres. But there's a lot of really delightful humorous fantasy out there.
Yeah, there's loads, and it does sell.
Yeah.
I think that there's I think the problem is the misconception amongst the publishing / book selling industry that it doesn't sell.
Right.
And I think maybe that's down more to the fact that they don't know how to sell it, that they don't know how to push it. They don't know how to find the audience for it. But it absolutely sells.
Yeah.
And if more publishers got behind it, and I think if more bookshops made space for it, there's a huge market for it. I mean, it's not just Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams. Those are just the two most famous names in comedy SFF.
Right.
But they're not the only ones out there. And there are a lot of people writing good sort of comedy fantasy, comedy science fiction, comedy genre stuff that deserve a bigger platform and a wider platform. And I would love it if the industry picked up on that.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be nice. it would be cool. Because I adore Terry Pratchett, read all of his books. I've read almost everything Douglas Adams has written as well. And it's just sort of like, I would like more of that. Can we please like...
And neither of them is writing anymore.
Exactly. So... Do you think maybe it's time? Yeah. And I even have a hard time looking for it. Like if I'm looking for comp authors to advertise my own stuff is a bit of a challenge, you know, like I have to find out who, like, okay, who's close to what I'm doing. Aside from like, I do use Terry Pratchett all the time, but it's also, you know, I probably need to change my covers if I want to actually target his audience.
Yeah, but the thing you find with this, I mean, so for example, if you're running Facebook ads, for example, which I do, finding comp authors is difficult because most of them are not big enough for Facebook to have recognized them. So like even somebody like Tom Holt, who I would consider to be, especially in the UK, a well-known author, he's not there. And he's not there on Facebook as a targeting option. You've basically got Terry Pratchett and Douglas Adams, and very little else. Yeah. And so you know you've got these two giants who kind of, and rightly so. They should be giants. They're brilliant. Yeah. But they cast this shadow as if you know anything that isn't at their level just doesn't exist. Yeah. And that's only going to change if the industry starts pushing other comedy fantasy and comedy sci-fi writers. Right.
Yeah, that's a strong point because it's a, you know, they deserve to cast a giant shadow, but at the same time, it's like, surely we could make room for some other authors in there. Not even me, but just like other people who are actually like, you know, doing really good at it.
It would be like, you know, your entire epic fantasy section being different kinds of bindings of Lord of the Rings. It's like, you know, yes, everybody knows Tolkien, but there's so much else in the genre going on that you know, diversity is a good thing.
Yeah. I have a dream sometimes of opening a let's say speculative fiction, like a sci-fi fantasy only bookshop that would have every subgenre of fantasy and sci-fi. So like there would absolutely be fantasy romance, and there would be humorous fantasy, and there would be fantasy, but just like, and then you could like really dig into those niches and be like, if you like the sections would essentially be like, if you like this, then you try these, you know, and do that. I have no actual interest in running a bookstore because that's a ton of work. But
that does seem like a hurdle to overcome.
Yeah. But there's a part of me that is like, wouldn't that be cool? Because then it would exist, and you could also like, you know, make it a cool venue and have lots of authors in and stuff. And I don't know, like, you know, there's some part of me that kind of wants to do that, but most of me is far too lazy to actually open a real store.
That sounds like work. That does sound
like work. I mean, running my own business as an independent author is enough, you know. It's sort of like adding like all the additional inventory. I mean, the funny thing is it's sort of just an expansion of everything I already do for my own business, because I do keep my, you know, like I do have my own inventory, and I do have to do it. You know, like I'm like, I feel like I weirdly now have most of the skills I would need to do that, and yet the bookkeeping alone scares the crap out of me.
It sounds more like something you want to exist rather than something you want to make exist, I feel.
Yeah. Anna says, I feel like your comments about publishers not knowing how to sell comedy fantasy can be applied to so many genres of fantasy and sci-fi. The first genre that comes to mind is Asian or African fantasy and sci-fi. Yeah, that's a good point, Anna. It's like there seems to be a struggle there in terms of marketing. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I feel like on Twitter, we see a lot of like those few publishers who seem to be actually embracing social media as advertising, but not as like paying for ads so much as just having a social media presence, etc. Thinking of like Orbit and Tor and maybe Angry Robot, like sort of the SFF branches of larger publishing houses that, although Angry Robot's actually independent, right? But like that, you know, actually embrace social media for what it is and try to sell things that way. Like they're doing a good job there, but the truth is I haven't been in a physical bookshop in ages. So like how many places, how many places even have subgenres under fantasy, right? Like how many bookshops don't, they just have a fantasy section and they don't break it down beyond alphabetical,
You're lucky
right?
if it's not just an SFF section. It could be
Right.
fantasy and sci-fi just together.
All together,
That's certainly when I was a kid, I remember going to bookshops and it was a science fiction and fantasy section. It was all just lumped in together.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you went in with a specific book in mind and you can look for the author's name, easy. But if you're just browsing, hoping to find something, you're wading through all kinds of stuff, which is fun in its own right, especially if you have like a chunk of time to wander around. But less fun if you're like, okay, I have 30 minutes. I want to find a new read and what's it going to be? And but of course, now we have like online resources for that too. There's Goodreads, there's Readerly, there's, I don't know, there's probably a bunch of other sites as well. And then of course, Amazon reviews. But yeah. Okay, but so Carpet Diem, hard sell though it is, are you going back to it? Is there another book in the pipes? I vaguely saw a blog post about maybe there was a second one.
Yep.
When I was stalking your blog.
So I started it, and it has a title. It's called I Don't Like Mondays.
Okay.
And it has about, I think I've written about maybe 15,000 words, 20,000 words, something like that. But what I found, so I started working on that as my next project when I finished The Lost War. But what I found was I was working on that when the first lockdown hit and the pandemic happened. And I just found that with the whole stress and worry of the whole situation, I just couldn't write comedy. I just couldn't get my head in it. And I think it's one of those things that I was thinking about this the other day, actually. Being a writer is one of those things where, readers get frustrated when it takes forever for an author to write a sequel to a book that they enjoyed. And, they get frustrated with them doing other things. You've got the likes of, particularly, most famously, Patrick Rothfuss and George R.R. Martin, who people are quite upset about the fact that they've taken so long to get their sequels out. And I think writing is one of those things where it's not as simple as just sit down and spend more time writing and you will finish your book, because it's not about the time you put in. You have to wrangle your brain to function in the way you want it to in order to produce something that's any good. I could sit and write a load of absolute garbage that wouldn't be funny, and I could finish that book and it would be terrible. But in order to write a book that's actually, worthy of being the sequel to a book that already has, a decent sized little fan base who are interested in reading the sequel, I've got to be able to write something good. I've got to be able to get into that kind of slightly silly, frivolous mindset, which is the kind of humor that it is.
Right.
And I just couldn't access that. I couldn't get into it at all. And when you're already, when like me, when you already have kind of mental health issues and you have to wrangle your brain most days anyway, throw that into a pandemic and try to do it with that. And it's like, it just wasn't happening. I was just beating my head against the wall. And the more I tried to write it, the worse it got. So that was the point where I had to accept that I had to stop and abandon that and move on to working on the second Eden book instead. Which flowed much more easily because it's a completely different mindset. It's a much more serious, it's a much more dark book. And it explores much more serious stuff. And that was fine. I could easily access that mindset from exactly where we are. So and what's interesting is I'm working on a sort of side project that involves me that requires me to kind of try and access that same kind of mindset now. And I'm still finding it difficult. It's still, the world is still not back to normal. There is still this low-lying stress and this feeling of abnormality that kind of squashes you and squashes your creativity and makes it hard just to think a lot of the time. And I think that's something that's really a consideration for, I know a lot of other writers who've been like, I think there was a tweet that went around sort of towards the end of last year, and it was like somebody had written something along the lines of, I saw several variations of it, but it was along the lines of, people who don't write books, wow, this is a great time to write a book. people who actually write for a living, how the hell am I supposed to write during all this crap? It's like, that's really true.
Yeah.
You know, people would come at it thinking, hey, you've got nothing else to do, but you can't leave the house, write a book. And those of us who actually are trying to write are just like, are you kidding? Like, how? I can't make my brain do this. So yeah, it requires you to get your brain in the right place to make it work. And for me, the way I write tends to be I write in my head a lot anyway. So when I'm writing something, I'm thinking about it all the time. It's kind of bubbling away in my subconscious. So by the time I sit down to actually write, I've got a good idea of what's going to come out probably anyway, because I've been thinking about it for however long beforehand. But when you can't get your mind to focus on that kind of thing, even sort of getting your subconscious in the background to work on it, then it becomes a much harder thing to do. And so I have a lot of sympathy for guys like Patrick Rothfuss and George R.R. Martin, because I'm sure they feel immense pressure to get those books done.
Which just makes it that much harder.
Huge pressure. And the irony of it is that pressure is probably getting in the way of them being able to do the work.
Right.
And I think if nobody was expecting the books from them, if they were just doing it because they wanted to write them, I imagine probably both of them would be done by now.
Right. Yeah.
To be honest.
Totally true. I often, and I cringe when readers like demand books from, especially like famous authors and stuff, and they're just like, wow, why isn't this done yet? Come on, hurry up. That's not how it works.
Yeah, it's not. If it was as easy as just sitting down and putting the hours in,
right,
then fine.
Yeah, but it's not.
But it isn't like that. It just isn't.
Yep. It's interesting. Like and so for readers who need a parallel, right? Like if you're a mood reader, if you are a reader who's like, oh, I'm, this stuff is going on in my life, and so I want to read this kind of book now because that's how my preferred form of escapism while this other stuff is happening. That is like, writers are often mood writers as well, and so like, you can't always point your brain at the project you want to work on, or sometimes not on any project at all. Because you're in whatever place. What's interesting to me is that I had the opposite reaction about what I felt I could write during the pandemic. You were talking about like you needed to write a more serious book because you couldn't do the lighthearted fun thing. And I actually didn't try to write like a humor book, so I don't know if that would have worked either. But for me, I had to write something more lighthearted with just like grabbing all my favorite ridiculous tropes and stuff and shoving them all into a single book. Okay. Because I couldn't hang out in the dark place that was like the world that Cyrus Claw takes place in. The earlier books are pretty dark because it's a pretty dystopian setup for those early books, and I couldn't, like, if I'd had to write those, I couldn't have done it. Like I couldn't do, and I even like reading wise, I couldn't read anything dark. I had to go like light and fluffy for my input and my output. But at the same time, like that was a direct reaction to the pandemic. Like I couldn't, and my parents dying and all that stuff. Like, so like I could not make myself do anything serious or dark. I could only make myself do like light, fluffy romp. Yeah. But it's the same mechanism. It's just that like,
yeah, exactly. It's what you can kind of emotionally and psychologically engage with. It's where your brain is at and what you can do. And that, that's, everybody has a different reaction to that different kind of, those different stimuli. So it's, absolutely. I will go back to it. I will finish it. Mm-hmm. I know what the plot is. Yeah. I've established the beginning of it, but I was working on it every day, and I was going to say to my wife, and I was like, yeah, I've written some, but it's not funny. Yeah. It's shit. Yeah. It's just like, it's terrible. So, you always think that with your first draft. It's like, no, I mean it this time. It really is terrible. It's not funny. There is nothing enjoyable about this, but nobody's going to want to read this.
Right.
I can't write this right now. Yeah. So I had to accept that my brain just wasn't capable of doing what I needed to do, and hope that when I come back to it in the future, when hopefully the world is a lot more normal and a lot less stressful, that I will be able to find that again.
Yeah. So how's the second Eden book going then? Or is it done? Or is it what's
second Eden, the first draft is done at 200,000 words. which is 50,000 words more than The Lost War. But again, that's kind of, I'm in a bit of a weird limbo place now, because so as a result of winning SPFBO, I now have an agent. And so the agent is shopping the Eden series at the moment to traditional publishers. So there's not a lot happening with it in terms of development or editing, because the problem being, if it's not a problem,
if you get
the issue being, if it gets a traditional deal, I'm going to have to cut about a quarter of that, because they want it much shorter. 200K is too long. Interesting. Whereas, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and they're all basically practical from the publishing industry. If so I kind of know how I'm going to do that. I know what can come out, and I know there's a storyline that can come out and go into the next book. So it's all doable. But if we don't get a deal, if we don't get a deal that works for everybody, then I won't cut that much. I will edit it, but I certainly won't take a quarter of the book out. So at the moment, I'm kind of can't do. There's no point in starting on an edit with it, because I don't know how I'm editing it. I don't know what, if I do take out certain bits of storyline, it's gonna mean rewriting, or not rewriting, but a different approach to how I edit the beginning, basically, on what I focus on and what I keep in, and where the pacing of it's going to have to change and all that kind of stuff. So the first draft is done. It was originally going to be a trilogy, and then I got to 200,000 words and realized I had far too much still to write to finish the story I wanted to finish in the second book. So then it became 4 books, because I needed another book to tell the rest of the book 2 storyline. So hey, I wrote too much. Oops.
I'm sure that'll work out all right.
I'm hoping it will. So yeah, the situation at the moment is everything's kind of on hold. Because either we'll get a deal and Lost War will be republished, I guess next year, and then probably the following year book 2 will come out, or we won't get a deal, and then book 2 will come out as quickly as I can then edit it and get it proofread and get it ready. So I don't know. That's the situation at the moment is. Fair. It'll be out. They'll both be out. Well, either Lost War will not be coming out again, or it will be coming out again, and that will be as soon as it can happen. And book 2 will be out as soon as it can practically come out, depending on how it gets published.
Gotcha.
But it is written. It exists. I promise it exists. There are 200,000 words written on my computer of a story. Oh my goodness. That is exciting. And I'm sure people who have read The Lost War will be very excited to hear that. And this is pretty much, we've actually covered most of my next question, which was that you've done trad in the past. You had Carpet Diem out with a small press, then you got the rights back, republished indie. And now, and of course, Lost War is currently indie pub. Then I wrote and now you've got an agent, and I put again question mark, because I'm not sure, did you have an agent before the small press published it? No. I was introduced to the small press by another author. Who was working with them. So no, I didn't have an agent before. Gotcha. So you've got an agent now, and you are, as we've just explained, shopping out the Lost War series, the Eden series. So is your plan to go full trad, or to do hybrid, or what are your thoughts for the? I'm making it up as I go along. To be honest, I'm kind of thinking long term about the whole thing, and so I'm trying to work out what's going to be the best for the next 10, 15, 20 years, for the rest of my writing career, rather than what's going to be the best thing right now. So if we get a deal for the Eden series, we haven't Ian, my agent, and I haven't spoken about whether he wants to look at Carpet Diem, whether we want to look at potentially trying to get a trad deal for that too. I don't know. As we've just discussed, it's a harder sell because it's comedy. It's not remotely the same kind of thing. It's very different. My suspicion would be, if we get a deal for Eden, that probably I would still publish. That Carpet Diem will probably stay with me, and it probably will publish the sequel myself. I don't know.
Right.
I'm open to whatever opportunities come along. I mean, prior to SPFBO, I hadn't really intended to try to get a traditional deal very hard with Lost Water. I sent it to one, maybe two agents, but very much kind of the, let's just rule this out before publishing it myself. So the honest answer is I don't know. Okay. For me, the appeal of a traditional deal is the widened platform, the access to kind of bookshops, the potential of translations into other countries. It's the bigger platform that comes from that, the whole thing. And that appeals to me, particularly having the sort of marketing and PR support of a big publisher like that, because that's not a part of the business I enjoy. I do it, but I don't find it fun. Really, I want to write. And so that for me is the attraction. And if that worked out, great, be delighted. If it doesn't work out, I'm also very happy to carry on doing it myself. And I've learned a lot just from the two books that I've published so far. I've learned a great deal from that and how I would approach stuff in future. It will give me more freedom, I suppose, to just write whatever the hell I want to write, as opposed to, pitching stuff to my agent and having him tell me what he thinks is the best thing for me to write next. So I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I suspect, it all really comes down to whether we get a deal for Eden or not. If we don't get a deal for Eden, then the answer is I will still be self-published. If we do, then maybe I end up going trad with everything, or maybe I stay hybrid and have some stuff that isn't necessarily fitting what the traditional industry are looking for, publishing that myself.
I honestly, that seems like a fun way to do it, just to always have in your back pocket the I want to write this idea and my agent doesn't think it's marketable, but forget it, I'm just going to do it anyway and self-pub it, and then
and it could even be one of those things where I write it and say, here, have a look at it, and if he doesn't love it, I go, okay, I'll publish it myself. So we will see.
Fair enough. Well, good luck with the trad piece, because that's I certainly get wanting to have someone else do your marketing. That is the thing, the piece that I loathe. But otherwise, I'm so much of a control freak. I'm not that tempted by trad, even though I'm sure I it would probably be better for me. But I'm just but I don't want someone else to be in control of my covers and my,
Absolutely. There is, I mean, you pay for that. You pay for the support by giving up control. And that's, that is, that's the deal you make, basically.
And fair enough. I definitely see the allure, but I also am a little too stubborn, I think, to go. I mean, I've always said, if a trad deal fell in my lap, I would probably take it if it were good, but I'm mostly of the, I cannot be bothered to spend because the thing I think that a lot of people don't think about is it's a huge amount of work to constantly be submitting, first to find an agent. And then once you've got an agent, then books go on sub for so long to try to get deals. And just that is a lot of work, and it takes a lot of patience, and I don't have a ton of patience. And so there's a part of I never tried to go trad for novels, but I did. I just short story submissions, but even that was so time consuming that I was because you have to wait 3 months before you hear back from anybody, and then you can finally sub your story to somebody else, and
exactly. And that was my experience too, and I also struggled for patience for it, and I think impatience was one of the large reasons that I was just well, we'll roll these out and then publishing it, because I can't wait. I'm not going to wait another 6 months to see if anything comes of it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just didn't even bother. I was just I'll just try this whole indie thing and see how it goes. And the answer is not that great in terms of sales, but it sure is fun. And luckily I'm in a position where I don't have to worry about paying the bills with it for now. So, all right, moving on to a sort of related question, because if you do have an agent, this is a thing that's sort of on the table, maybe. If you could write for any IP, what would you choose? And for anyone who's not,
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to explain for people watching. If you don't know what IP is, it's intellectual property, which means you're writing in someone else's world. And sorry, go ahead, Justin.
Batman. absolutely Batman. No question.
Awesome.
I remember. So I tried to do a creative writing course. I'm just sorry. I've just realized it's got dark. It's night here. So I tried to do a creative writing course, which I completely failed to finish, along with several other similar things I tried to do when I was younger. And it asked, like, what is your kind of aspiration? I had a really clear picture in my head of kind of sitting, having a meeting with an editor in a New York cafe, talking about writing the next issue of Batman, and that was my thing.
Nice.
I want to write Batman.
Nice.
So yeah, give me anything. But then the other problem with that is he's kind of been overdone now. So I don't know that there's a space for him right now. So my fallback would be another comic, and it would be Legion of Superheroes, because I'd like to see that done well.
Cool. Yeah.
There are some really good storylines in there that could be adapted. I'd be happy either to write for the comic or adapt it for TV and film.
Screen. So that brings me to my next question, which is script writing is a thing that you have done.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. What have you written? What is
So nothing's been produced yet, but actually the one thing that has been produced from my script writing career is my son.
Wait a minute.
I met my wife through a script writing competition.
Okay, fair.
So our youngest child exists because we met through a script writing competition.
Amazing.
So yeah, I entered this. I always felt like I wanted to write scripts as well. And when I started writing Carpe Diem, I was, I don't know, maybe 30,000 words into it. A friend of mine who's a stand-up comedian, Jason Whitehead, told me that the BBC were running this competition for sitcom writing. And there was like 2 weeks to the deadline, and I was like, yeah, I want to try that. So I did, and I entered it, and through the competition, first of all, I did quite well. I was a runner-up.
Nice.
There were like 8 winners and 8 runners-up, and I was one of the runners-up. But I also met my wife through it, and we met and started writing together, and then eventually got together as a couple. So yeah, we've done a fair few things. Life has gotten in the way a lot with that, and of course novels have taken over and got in the way of writing script as well. But so the biggest thing we've done so far is we met an independent producer who had bought the rights to Julian May's Saga of the Exiles series. And so we adapted the first book, The Many Colored Land, into what is essentially a 3-hour screenplay.
Oh, cool.
Which he, to my knowledge, is still working on getting produced. But that started, I think we wrote it in 2012, so it's been a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've kind of got things simmering rather in the background that we hope to get back to one day. But life has been in the way. We've had to move around a bit unexpectedly sometimes, and so it's there in the background. We spent 18 months just recently on BBC Scotland writer development course for comedy, and that was amazing. That was a great experience. BBC Writers Room is a really great supportive thing for writers and trying to develop writers to get them, and we've got some connections there at BBC Scotland now as well. So one of the things I'm working on is something that might come to fruition there. It's at a very, very barely exists stage at all, and probably won't happen, but we're going to give it a go and see how it works.
Cool. Well, good luck. That sounds neat. Next question, obviously very important. Favorite football team? And yes, I mean European football, not no one cares about American.
Yeah, I'm a big Aberdeen fan. In fact, before coming on to talk to you today, I just watched us get beat 2-0, but it didn't matter because we were 5-1 up from the first leg, so we're still through the next round. But yeah, I'm a big Aberdeen fan. Funnily enough, I missed last week's game because it was on my wife's birthday. We went out for dinner for her birthday, so I didn't watch us winning 5-1, but I did watch us get beat 2-0. So there's,
maybe you should stop watching.
Well, I mean, there is that.
No,
but yeah, I'm hoping.
Could you be bad luck for the team?
You never know. It wouldn't surprise me. But I'm hoping that in the next round we do a bit better in the games when I'm able to watch, and I don't miss the good games.
Nice.
And just see the ones where we get beat.
So I was originally going to ask you about how you became such a football fan, because I have to say that like looking at your Twitter feed, it's a lot of like progressive politics, as is I think a lot of ours these days, and book stuff, and then like some very enthusiastic or crushed tweets about football.
Yeah.
And that just cracks me up, because I like, out of everything else, I wouldn't have expected that. But I no longer need to ask, because you already explained that your dad played pro football.
Yeah.
So right. I can only assume that is the origin of this level of,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a kind of an old there's an old family story that apparently I kicked a ball before I could walk, basically. Yeah, it was I grew up around football. I used to right. So mom and dad were both only 19 when they had me. Okay. So I was kind of at the time when dad was playing, I was either one of the only kids or the oldest kid amongst the teams that he played for. As I got older, it got to the point where I used to go to training with them, and I'd go play with them at training and stuff, and it was amazing. And he used to run. It was a really common thing, particularly in America, that in the summer, the players who weren't playing at the time would run these summer camps for kids to go, and they'd spend the week playing football all week. And I used to always go to, because my dad was running them, so I just went to them. So I went and played football all summer with my dad at these summer camps. It was amazing. So yeah, I grew up playing football.
But did you play in school
in
then?
America, playing football?
Yeah.
So it was like it was weirdly like it was a much smaller sport then. I mean, I think nowadays it's, for all that it's not, for all that it's like the fifth sport, I think, in terms of actual professional leagues in America, because you've got what, basketball, baseball,
American
football, ice hockey, and I think then soccer, basically. But as far as like participation for kids under the age of 18, I think it's the biggest sport in America. So it's like, it's really interesting that there's this massive participation up to sort of college level. Yeah. And then it doesn't follow through at the fan base doesn't follow through at the professional level because of these other very much traditional American sports that are there. So so it was growing up there, so I was kind of, because I grew up with and everything with dad and everything. So I was a comparatively good football player for my age when I was over there. Mm-hmm. But when I came back here, I wasn't. I was entirely average, because it's much more of a football culture here. Right. But I was a better basketball player than everybody else in my school. So, right,
because no one else had played basketball before until high school.
Because I grew up playing basketball as well. Right. And in America, I was entirely average, but come back here, and that basketball and softball were the two games that I was really good at school. That like basically, I mean, when I used to play, it was funny when we played basketball at school. The PE teacher used to always have to play on the other team, because he was the only person who could basically play against me, because nobody else had grown up playing basketball.
That's hilarious.
So that was funny. And then with softball, of course, like, that's like cricket is the sport over here. Right. Yeah. Comparatively. So people just didn't play baseball and softball. And so we'd play softball and basically, I'd step up with a bat, and like all the outfielders would go 10 yards back from where they were, because basically I was
like, he's actually going to hit it.
Yeah, I was like the only one who'd grown up hitting a softball out of the park. Right, so it was like, it was so funny. It was like, I grew up playing these American sports, so I'm better at them. But my comparative skill level at football was completely different. It went like that.
That's hilarious. What an interesting shift too, right? Like I was, when we lived in Germany, I was little enough. I played football there, but I think that was it, because there wasn't a baseball team and there wasn't and so I was just a like totally average football player, even though I'd been playing it since I was little. But but in the States where it's like swarm soccer, like everybody just like like those little kid teams where nobody knows what they're doing.
Bunch ball. We used to call it, where just basically just have a little group of children running around following a ball around. Yeah,
exactly. And I was never like, I stopped playing after I think middle school, and so I played lacrosse all through middle school and high school, and then played field hockey after that. Or like also in high school, but and then I switched to rugby in college. Okay, and that was fabulous. Okay, like it was the first sport I was actually like just naturally good at, and then also I enjoyed playing it a lot, so I practiced a ton. But like, it turned out that was my sport, and it's to this day the only sport I will watch on television, because I played a ton of sports all through everything all the way through college even, but I just absolutely don't enjoy watching sports on TV.
There you go.
But it's weird because like, I don't know. I've never been that into like watching someone else play a sport. I like it, just watching a sport just makes me want to go play it. I'm just like, I see people playing and I'm just like, I just want to go play the sport. I don't actually want to watch other people do it.
I think that's true for a lot of people. I mean, I think participating in sport and watching sport are two different hobbies.
Completely.
Really. And a lot of the time, yes, a lot of the time they overlap. But I don't think it's unusual that, you know, some people are the other way. Some people love watching them, but you wouldn't get them out actually playing them at all.
But and like when I talk to things. Yeah, I think when I talk to people, that is the more common thing, is that like I talk to people who are huge fans of whatever, and they don't play, and they never have, but they love watching and I'm like, okay, that's cool. It's not a thing that I get, but that's great. But they always look at me like I have two heads when they're like, you know, they're like, hey, we're watching the Super Bowl, and I'm like, no, I'm not interested at all. And they're like, what? You're weird. And I'm like, do you want to go play football? Like, I will actually play American football. It's actually it's not bad to play, but I can't stand watching it. It's like watching it is basically like watching people stand around. And I'm used to rugby. And like, I love, like, my favorite thing about rugby is that you get tackled and that's the beginning of the play. That's not the end of the play. You're just like, anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say, we can slightly go full circle on this, because I think that the thing about watching the Super Bowl in particular is that it's an event. It's an event that you do with other. It's like role playing. Here we go. Watching the Super Bowl is like role playing. Okay. Because it's about the experience of hanging out with your mates, and you've got something to focus on. That you're you know, there's a game that you're focusing on that is kind of the reason you're together. But really, you're there to hang out with your mates and eat pizza and drink beer.
That is a fair point.
I've never heard anybody compare the Super Bowl D&D before, and I'm going to claim I came up with that by myself.
That's good. No, it's solid. I like that. It is actually, like, the thing that I have talked about before with people is that we all have our different nerddoms, right? Like the things that we geek out on, and people don't frame it this way, but they're absolutely sports nerds, right? Like, if totally. You can name all the players on a team, I hate to break it to you, but you're a nerd. You're just a nerd about football or baseball or whatever, you know, like hockey. Yeah. And if you can tell me like who traded who in 1984 for this particular thing, like, you're a real nerd, like a serious nerd. You're just nerdy about something that we culturally have decided isn't nerdy.
It's a cool thing to be geeky about.
Right, I guess, but they're all cool things to be geeky about. I mean, like, look, I'm not into stamp collecting, but I think that people who are into it are great. Like it's just like, you know, people love what they love. And I've always thought that it's interesting to me that we have decided that certain things culturally it's okay to know all the little details about, and other things that makes you a geek. And I'm just sort of like, what an arbitrary.
But we have all these things. It's like high art and low art in culture. You know, it's like, you know, painting. I remember there was a great Calvin and Hobbes cartoon where Calvin and Hobbes were talking about they were talking about how a painting was, you know, high art, that was very respectable, but then a comic, low art, that's not good. But then they had like an Andy Warhol style painting of a comic, and they're like, juxtaposing high art. And it's like, why are we classifying all of our art in this way? This is ridiculous. It's like, you know, people just like what they like. It's all subjective. It's all, all of it is basically about making you think and feel something. Right. And who cares how it's classified as to whether it's highbrow or lowbrow or whatever. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah. No, it's true. It is a weird, there's just this weird elitism around, I mean, just about everything, right? There's like, you know,
I mean, you've got literary fiction and genre fiction, and it's like, well, this one sells more, but this one is higher art, partially because it doesn't sell.
Partially because it doesn't sell. Yeah, it's not commercial. It's done for the art, and like, I mean,
okay, why are we grading our art?
Yeah, exactly. People like to know what's better.
Yeah, that's true.
But which is as if you can objectively determine what that is. But
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I do think, I mean, that it's an interesting question. I think it's actually far more interesting to have a conversation about whether or not you can and whether or not you should try to rank art.
Yeah, exactly.
Than it is to actually have the conversation about ranking it. But I think philosophically, it's an interesting question, because I think critically assessing things and talking about themes and values and stuff like that is actually really interesting and important. But then attempting to just be like, this is better than this because reasons.
Because we've arbitrarily decided that this has more artistic merit than this does.
Right.
Despite the fact that this probably took longer to create than this did, and at least as much talent. It's just a different medium.
Yeah. It's just, it's weird. It's weird. But, you know, like, human brains are interesting things. We like our categories. We like our rankings and our whatever. It's, there's an interesting need for humans to be able to say those things and sort of make those claims and statements. And I'm not sure why. I mean,
there's some snobbery about it. There's definitely some snobbery about it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question. There is some snobbery about people who like things. Like, I mean, you know, there is definitely a snobbery around things like ballet and opera and chamber music and things, and only because they're old. Like, you know, in his day, Mozart was like frowned upon as like Elvis. You know what I mean? It's like,
like.
But now Mozart is like pinnacle of classical high snobbery art,
which I'm sure he would find mortifying.
I've actually discovered in my adulthood. I was going to say my old age, but that feels a bit self-effacing. In my adult, I quite like Mozart. I actually do quite like classical music, and I particularly do like Mozart. But equally, I still would rather listen to some grunge or the Lumineers, as my teacher.
Hey, the Lumineers! Aw,
love the Lumineers.
I love the Lumineers too. They're fun.
But yeah, I've quite a broad taste in music, and I remember as a kid thinking like I had to pick either rock or rap. I couldn't like both. And I did like both, but I had to pick one because
people try to make you, right? Like they're like, well, what's your favorite genre of music or books or whatever?
And then you have to dress appropriately for the style that you have picked, because you can't like both. You got to be one or the other.
No, you can't dress grunge if you like, you know, rock or whatever. Yeah. Society is a funny old place. Which is half the fun of creating your own society in a book and just like trying to fix it all yourself.
Absolutely.
Or at least highlight the problems.
I hadn't thought about this actually. Maybe it's part of word building. We should start working in like snobbery and prejudice about different things.
It's an interesting thing to establish, right? Like a preference for one artistic form over another, or for one magic form over another. I've been recently reading, I don't know if you've ever read Rachel Aaron's Heartstrikers series.
No.
But she writes, there's this whole series set in this one place in North America in a near future sort of dystopia with magic. Magic has come back into the world. Really cool setup. But what's particularly interesting to me is that, and not actually in the Heartstriker series, it comes up a little bit there, but more prominently in her other books that take place in the same place, which I forget the name of the series, but it starts with minimum wage magic. There's two different schools of magic, and there's one that's very prominent and then totally looks down on the other one. There are thaumaturges who like study magic academically and use casting circles that are very detailed and essentially like work out like mathematical equations. They're almost like computer programming, they're described as often. And then there are shamans who are super looked down upon, like, and the thaumaturges are like, oh, they just like make stuff up and they're hazardous, they're not safe, they can't replicate their results ever. It's like super slapdash and nobody should trust them ever. Whereas, and then we learn that actually it's more just like like shamans have an instinctual feel for magic, and they do make stuff up without circles and stuff, but that's actually a perfectly valid casting system or whatever. But what I liked about that was that it took magic and made it a thing that there was this snobbery about, and this sort of academic take on it, looking down on this other group. That's cool. And you know, and it was just like, I was like, this is such a fun version.
I mean, that is a thing. That is a kind of thing. What's the what was the novel with the two was it Norrell and Strange? There was TV adaptation?
Mr. Norrell and Doctor Strange or something like that, or
something like that, yeah, or the other way around. I
or
can't
Dr.
remember.
Norrell and Mr. Strange. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I was thinking Doctor Strange is Marvel.
That's a Marvel thing.
But yeah, yeah, I mean, that's kind of a theme of that as well. And that I think about it is one of them is very academic and is highbrow because he's studied it, and the other one just has a natural flair for it. But everybody kind of looks down on it because he hasn't studied it.
Just making it up. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it is a theme that is there, isn't it?
Yeah. And I don't know, I like that. But then I like to get philosophical about random stuff and also think about the way society perceives different
Me too.
activity.
There's another thing we got in common. Look, we're practically related.
See? We're basically the same person, Justin.
Yeah. I'm coming to terms with that. It's okay. I'm coming to terms with it. It's cool.
Yeah, it's good. I knew I'd get you there in the end. There are, let's see, so a couple of questions here, or at least comments. Pam replied to something and said, the exception is gymnastics. I love watching it, but I know I would die if I tried. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah. Gymnastics. I mean, gymnastics. But here's the thing. Like, I think once you're looking into a sport done at its highest level, it's easier for me to like fathom the attraction to just watching it, because gymnastics, I love watching the Olympics in general, a bunch of sports that I've never participated in, because I'm like, holy crap, just look at humans like maxing out their
what they can actually do with their bodies. It's amazing.
Stuff. Yeah. And that always blows my mind. I don't actually like the Olympics as an organization, and I think it's problematic for a lot of reasons, but I do think that whole, just the idea of let's take people from every part of the world and see who is the best person at this one really hard physical achievement. I don't know why I like that. It's kind of a silly thing to do with our time, but it's also really neat. And I love that it like has pushed the bounds of what we try to and can do with our bodies. And I think that's pretty cool. And I also love the worldwide aspect of it.
It is cool. I mean, essentially, it was invented to replace wars. So
and that's great. Like, let's do that. Let's compete in sports instead of blowing each other up. I'm all for it. And Pam has also said, I say we ban the term literary fiction. It is sort of fairly meaningless term. But I don't know about banning it, but it does seem I don't know if there's a point to that exact phrase. Pam also says, when I was a teenager, it was the horrible choice between Oasis and Blur. Were you forced to directed?
Yeah, I remember that. Remember what that was. So that was when I was that was in fact, funnily enough, so talking about shows we did, the next year we did a show, and one of the posters we did it was about fighting and stuff. One of the posters we did was Liam Gallagher and Damon Albarn were on the poster together, and it was that was a thing back in the 90s.
And you must choose. Holy crap, I've just realized the amount of time that we've been talking, which is
good
awesome.
Lord, it's nearly 10:30. Wow. Okay. Yeah. That explains why I really need to pee. That explains that a lot. Yeah. Okay.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I did not realize we'd been talking that long. This has been a really, really super fun conversation, and I don't really want it to end. But we have gone on so many tangents, which is just my life. I would like to pretend that it's an exception, but I just cannot stay on task.
All the best conversations go off in interesting directions.
Exactly. So I will, I'll just have to pick one last question. We'll make it just like the last thing. And the next 3-4 questions are all super simple. I'm going to skip the insurance one, although I'm very curious about how that happened in your life, but we'll talk about it some other time.
I can answer that very quickly.
Okay, you can.
So I intended to, after moving back from the States, I intended to go back to the US to go to college.
Yeah.
I discovered too late that I couldn't afford it. It was too late to apply to college in the UK. So I had to work for a year after leaving school before I went to university. And the two jobs that were in abundance in Edinburgh because of the financial sector were either banking or insurance. So I ended up working for an insurance company for a year, and it was awful.
Amazing. So it's basically like a gap year of working a terrible desk job and then
exactly
to school. Okay.
Yeah. And it made me appreciate university so much more.
That's good. You're like anything to get out of insurance.
Yay.
Brilliant. Okay, so that won't be the last question because that's not as exciting. The other questions are all about fantasy. choices. I'm going to go with trope. What is your all-time favorite fantasy trope? I mean, I know it's so hard to pick a favorite, but you could just give us one of your favorites.
So again, funnily enough, this came up in the AMA yesterday, and I didn't really have an answer. But then I thought about it and thought, actually, no, I kind of do, and I do love a cavalry charge. My favorite moment by far, it gets me every single time. My favorite moment in the Lord of the Rings films is when AMR bellows "To the King" at Helm's Deep, and they come and the Rohirrim come charging down the hill every time. That's just like goosebumps all over me. I love it. So yeah, apparently I love a cavalry charge.
Excellent. Have you written one into your own stuff?
Sort of. There's a sort of a one. Well, it's a bit of a spoiler.
Okay, don't.
There's sort of a one-person cavalry arrival scene in the Lost War, which is one of my favorite scenes in the Lost War, which probably just ties into how much I like that trope.
Do you like horses? Do you ride? Or you like?
I rode a horse once and I could barely sit down for a week because I had no skin left on my ass bone. So yeah, that did not work.
That did not work. Okay, so it's not a personal investment in riding. It's just that charge of.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't literally have to be on horseback. It can be. It can just be. It's the wave of saviors arriving when everything looks bleak. It's that.
Gotcha.
It's
that turning of the tide with.
That's it. It's the save. It's the last minute. It's the last minute save.
Nice. Yeah, that is always a good moment. Excellent. Okay. Well, I'm going to let you go because you have to pee so badly. And also, but if anyone has any further questions for Justin, maybe consider putting them into the permanent comments underneath the video. And maybe if Justin has time, he can come back and answer some later.
Yeah, definitely.
And sorry that we didn't get to more audience questions, although we did, there's nothing sitting there that we didn't answer. So we covered everything that was up so far.
Cool.
And thank you so much for your time, Justin. This was lovely.
It's been a pleasure.
Do it again sometime.
Let's do it over beer sometime.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that would be excellent. But also, if you ever want to come on QuaranCon again when you've got something new coming out, let us know. And
apparently I'm hosting the SPFBO panel this year.
Yeah, I've heard.
So it's just a rumor. I've heard.
Pam informs us that that's what's happening.
Yeah, cool. I'm up for that.
Sweet.
Definitely.
Excellent. So thank you everyone who has been watching. I know we've had a hardcore 7 people here for this entire time. And
guys, what?
Right? Yeah, feature film.
2.5 hours of listening to us whitter on. Well done. Well, I hope you took bathroom breaks.
Right. and I hope you had snacks and stuff too. I feel like we did not prepare for this. But thanks everybody. Next week, please tune back in. I'll be interviewing Dixon Real. I really probably just butchered the last name of her pen name, also known as Eve. She's got a new book coming out, so everybody come check that out. I sent out a QuaranCon email about it, and I'll be posting about it again online. That's it for QuaranCon. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Come maybe donate to our coffee account, or just follow us on Twitter, etc., to make sure you're always up to date with what's happening. And thanks again, Justin, for being here. And I'm now actually